Chapter 464. Wuxia lay comfortably in one of the gale's huge claws, allowing it to bring him higher into the sky. He believed that the gale would not bite the hand that fed it. Or, even if it did, what could Wuxia do to it with the help of a dozen adult gale? The adult gale was a frightening existence that could hunt down a gold immortal true dragon for food. Let them do whatever they want, thought Wuxia, who was too lazy to think about it. Layer after layer of clouds were broken through, and layers of astral winds were thrown down below. There were also heavenly flames, xianbing, boiling light current, star sand ocean, and many other natural hazards that could kill even gold immortals. The group of gale carefully avoided these frightening things, bringing Wuxia all the way up. They flew higher, and higher. These gales transformed into gusts of wind, and a large gust of cyan wind carried them straight up into the sky. Their flying speed was nearly 100 times faster than the acquired magnetic sword escape technique that Wuxia unleashed with all his might. With just a flick of a finger, they could reach a height of several thousand miles high. Just like that, Wuxia flew for a full 6 hours, enjoying all sorts of marvelous scenes in the sky. Especially when they passed through a layer of thunderclouds that measured over 100,000 miles thick, Wuxia could not help but be amazed by the strange and dangerous place created by the heaven and earth. There were no other impurities in this layer of thunderclouds, and everything was ruled by the purest energy of thunder. In this layer of thunderclouds, which was over 100,000 miles thick and covered an immeasurable area, lived countless strange creatures that looked like jellyfish, whose bodies were over 1,000 miles long and translucent. These magical creatures had been slowly stretching their beautiful bodies, gently waving their long tentacles that were wrapped in dazzling electric bolts. They were hunting a kind of caterpillar in the thunderclouds, which was 7 to 8 miles long and made of electric bolts, feeding on a kind of caterpillar. These gales' bodies were wrapped in a strong green gale as they flew straight through the thunderclouds. Slowly, these enormous creatures reached out their tentacles, trying to capture a few gales for dinner. Fortunately, the speed of the gale was too fast. Although these creatures were huge in size, their movement was too slow. As a result, Wuxia and his company managed to avoid their attack and pass through the thundercloud belt with ease. Wuxia suddenly recalled a frightening creature that was recorded in Scroll of Stealing, called the Mother of Thundercloud Lightning. This creature lived in the lightning and fed on the spirits born from the lightning. Every newborn thundercloud thundermother had the cultivation base of a heaven immortal, and an adult thundercloud, a giant creature that was nearly 1,000 miles long, possessed a destructive power comparable to a gold immortal. In the torrent of heavenly fire, Wuxia saw a fire dragon beast with 6 wings on its back. It was formed purely from dazzling speed heavenly fire. In the Xianbing zone, Wuxia and his companions were nearly killed by a centipede-shaped beast, which was over 10,000 miles long and had countless thin wings on both sides of its body. The heavenly centipede flew as fast as a gale, and the dark blue nether energy it breathed out from its mouth was extremely powerful. A frightening energy that could freeze the fleshly body of a gold immortal into ice crystals. One of the gale was nearly hit by the dark blue nether energy. Fortunately, its movement was much more agile than the heavenly centipede. After a series of violent evasive maneuvers, the gale brought Wuxia safely out of the Xianbing zone. Amidst the torrent of light, Wuxia saw the light wildebeest, which flew as fast as a beam of light. Amidst the star sand ocean, Wuxia saw the extremely greedy star sandworms. They were strange creatures that looked like earthworms, but with a length of over 1,000 miles, and could stretch their body to over 100,000 miles long in the blink of an eye. They were attacking a true dragon, who came out of nowhere and was accidentally sucked into a huge vortex of heavenly star sand in the star sand ocean. The true dragon, whose overall strength was comparable to a lower-tier gold immortal, was turned into a dried corpse by the group of greedy star sandworms. Wuxia had no idea how many such perilous zones they had passed through as they flew upward. After 3 days and 3 nights, the gale finally stopped before a boundless ocean of wind. Wuxia looked down and saw the vast Panga continent right before his eyes. Even with the mystic eyes of universe, Wuxia could not see anything on the ground clearly. No matter where he looked, Wuxia could not see the edge of Panga continent. It was as if this continent had no edge at all. He took a deep breath and sighed with emotion at the vastness of Pangu continent. Suddenly, a melodious voice came to his ears. Human cultivators, listen up. The dozen of adult Gale shrunk their bodies at the same time. Their bodies emitted a strong light, and gradually, a dozen men and women with graceful and luxurious appearances came standing before Wuxia. These men and women were handsome and beautiful, and there was an innate aura of nobility emanating from their bodies. They looked like lofty monarchs, so outstanding that no one dared to approach them. The one who spoke to Wuxia was the woman who was obviously the leader among these men and women. She was clad in a long black robe, and had a pair of eyes that shone like stars. She turned to Wuxia and said, "Human cultivators, thank you for saving my only child. As a token of gratitude, we have brought you here. Go inside and search for your own opportunity. If you are lucky enough to find it, you will be rewarded with great benefits." She raised her beautiful and slender neck proudly and said, "I'm Lady Feng Qinger, the queen of the Green Feather tribe of the Gale clan. The one you have saved is my only son, Feng Yanxi. We, the Gale clan, have always distinguished kindness and hatred clearly. Those who bully our clansmen will be punished, but those who help our clansmen will definitely be rewarded by us." The little Gale, who had Wuxia in his hand, gave a few coos, flapped his wings and slightly touched Wuqia's body with the tips of his wings. Lady Feng Qinger puckered her lips and gave the little Gale a fierce glare, then helplessly shook her head and said something to a skinny man standing next to her. They were talking in the way of communication used by the Gale clan, so Wuxia had no idea what their coos meant. The man took a step forward, glanced at Wuxia from head to toe, and said coolly, "Young Master Feng Yanxi asked us to give you more benefits. After all, it was you who saved his life. Fine, I'll give you a little bit of the bloodline of the Gale between the heaven and earth. Whether you can enjoy it or not will depend on your fate." Suddenly, the fingernail on the man's right hand sprung out, about 1 foot long. With a gentle cut on Wuqia's wrist, a green thread of blood slowly squeezed out from his wrist. Not long after that, a 3 feet long blood thread, as thin as a hair and emanating a powerful energy wave, squeezed out from the man's body. Carefully, he held the blood thread with both hands and handed it over to Wuxia. Wuxia was taken aback. He patted on Feng Yanxi's claw, then respectfully took over the green blood thread, which kept twisting and flying like a wild gale. A suction force came from his palm, and the blood thread squeezed into his body along with a whistling sound of wind, merging with all his limbs and bones in a blink of an eye. Hastily, Wuxia exercised the technique found in Scroll of Stealing, using the technique of bloodline inheritance to merge the innate divine ability of Gale with his entire body. All the power contained in the bloodline was perfectly inherited by Wuxia, without any waste. Only those who cultivated Scroll of Stealing could perfectly merge an external bloodline like this. If it were some other people, even if they were primordial immortals, it would be extremely difficult for them to achieve such an effect. After merging the green blood thread into his body, Wuxia felt his body suddenly became lighter. It was as if his bones, flesh, meridians, blood vessels, and internal organs had turned into empty bamboo tubes, or feathers that were fluttering in the wind. There was a wild gale whistling through his body, and suddenly, he had formed a magical connection with the wind between the heaven and earth. Wuxia narrowed his eyes, his heart pounding vigorously. In Scroll of Stealing, there was a technique that could steal the bloodline of all kinds of divine beasts between the heaven and earth, merging their innate divine abilities into one's body. However, none of the divine beasts could be easily provoked. Therefore, the fact that Wuxia could obtain the bloodline of the Gale for no reason was a great favor. Bowing respectfully at Feng Qinger's mother, Wuxia said in a deep voice, "Thank you for the generous gift, Your Majesty. In the future, if the Green Feather tribe has any request, Wuxia will dare to refuse." Feng Qinger smiled faintly, shook her head disapprovingly, and said, "Never mind. We, the Gale clan, can fly freely above the 9 heavens, and we don't need you human cultivators. Come, we'll escort you to the core of this ocean of storms. Along the way, you can collect some wind spirit essence, which can strengthen the bloodline of the Gale in your body, and improve your affinity to the wild wind force between the heaven and earth. The wind spirit essence is also an excellent material for crafting upper-grade immortal items. If you find it, don't let it go. After thanking Feng Qing'er's mother, Wuqi asked, "What is in the core of this ocean of storms?" Feng Qing'er smiled faintly and said softly, "Nothing remarkable. It is just the mansion of a fallen primordial immortal. That immortal has some relationship with the Gale clan, so only the members of the Gale clan know the location of his mansion. Am I right? Since you have saved Lao Ai, I'll give you an opportunity to obtain the treasures in it. Whether you can seize it or not will depend on your fate." Feng Xiaohou cooed a few times, flapped his wings and grabbed up Wu Qi. Wu Qi stood on the huge claw of Feng Xiaohou, which was about 1 mile in circumference. A gust of strong wind rolled up everyone, and they flew straight into the boundless ocean of storms, which was composed of black, green, white, blue and green gales. Goo 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 goo. Along the way, Feng Xiaohou kept rocking his head and making goo goo sounds. But too bad, Wu Qi could not understand him. The bloodline of the Gale clan was extremely powerful. Snow-armored heaven-devouring pythons could transform into human form when they were around the 24th tier of Heaven Immortal. However, the members of the Gale clan had to possess the cultivation base of Gold Immortal before they could transform into human form and speak human language. With Feng Xiaohou's current cultivation base, he would have to work hard for many periods before he could transform into human form. The gust of wind brought Wu Qi and his company through countless storms effortlessly. After flying for 2 days and 2 nights, Wu Qi collected several hundred pieces of wind spirit essence, each the size of a small hill, green in color, and containing the supreme aura of Gale spirit. Not only could these wind spirit essences strengthen the bloodline of the Gale, but more importantly, they were excellent materials for crafting upper-grade immortal items. If they fell into the hands of a brilliant grandmaster of forging, they could even be used to craft gold immortal items. Suddenly, Feng Qing'er came to a halt. Ahead of them, in a void surrounded by countless dark whirlwinds and vortexes, was a small landmass that measured about 1,000 miles in both width and length, hovering quietly in midair. There were mountains, rivers, forests, and grasslands on it. And on top of a lofty mountain in the center of the landmass stood a dilapidated palace that occupied about 100 acres of land. Feng Qing'er grabbed Wu Qi and threw him into the palace. Chapter 465. Giving a strange cry, Wu Qi flew towards the small landmass in an arc. Along the way, the strong wind brought countless wind blades in all directions, but when Wu Qi flew past, the strong wind brushed past his body like the gentle hand of a lover caressing Wu Qi, not causing him any harm. Not only that, the strong wind even injected a lively force into his body, allowing Wu Qi to easily control his body. Like a fish swimming in the water, he flew across the nearly 100 miles of storm and landed safely on the small landmass. Feng Xiaoxiao cooed and gently patted Feng Qing'er's mother with his wings. Feng Qing'er rolled her eyes and gave Feng Xiaoxiao a few fierce slaps on the face. "If you dare to run around again, I'll let you be killed by those mortals. I won't care about you anymore." Alas, with me bringing him here, and the Gale bloodline helping him control the strong wind, as long as his luck is not too bad, this treasure left behind by an ancient immortal will naturally be his. Feng Miao spread its wings, showing a look of disapproval. He shrunk his body, and the 10 miles wingspan bird shrank to the size of a fist. Like a chick, he hopped onto Feng Qing'er's shoulder, cooed and pecked her earlobe with his beak. Feng Qing'er gave a cold snort, grabbed Feng Xiaoxiao with both hands, and pressed him down fiercely. Feng Xiaoxiao opened his mouth and let out a miserable shriek. His legs twitched and his eyes rolled back. Madame Feng Qing'er kept yelling at Feng Xiaoxiao, then began to beat and curse Feng Xiaoxiao. Wu Qi landed on the landmass. From a distance, the landmass, which looked to be only about 1,000 miles in both width and length, suddenly became extremely huge. Wu Qi opened his mystic eyes of universe and looked into the distance. The edge of the horizon was over 100,000 miles away from him. This was a spatial restrictive spell constructed by a mighty immortal. This landmass was not as ordinary as it looked. Carefully spreading out his divine will, Wu Qi sensed the frozen wind in the surrounding air. Just like how flowing water turned into ice, the wild wind on this landmass was frozen in the air as well. With his divine will, Wu Qi could even draw out the outlines of the storms in the air. All the storms were frozen in the air, invisible and formless, and could only be sensed by divine will. Gingerly, Wuxia reached out his hand and gently touched the frozen wind that blocked his way. Green ripples emerged in the air, and Wuxia sensed a desolate and lonely emotion from the frozen wind. The Gale bloodline that had just fused with his body gave Wuxia a feeling of compassion for the frozen wind. He sighed lightly and said, "Do you really want to dance? The wind should be free and unfettered to soar between heaven and earth. It should not be like it was now, frozen in the air, unable to move, unable to be free." With a thought in Wuqi's mind, a gust of wind shot out from his fingertip and fused with the frozen wind in front of him. The entire landmass suddenly came alive. The air vibrated violently, while gusts of wild wind blew towards Wuxia from all directions. Wuqi's body was lifted up by the wind, dancing gracefully in the air. The frozen flowers, grasses, and trees on the landmass began to sway in the wind. Suddenly, they were filled with a life force, and the aura of life quickly emanated from them, spreading across the entire landmass. The strong wind lifted Wuxia up and brought him flying towards the palace located right in the center. Wuxia gently landed in front of the palace. Like a giant hand, the wild wind pushed Wuxia from behind and pushed him into the palace. This palace was built entirely from green jade. Originally, it had a few halls, but now most of them had collapsed, leaving only broken fences and dilapidated walls, looking very desolate. Only the palace in the center was still standing. However, the roof of the palace, which was made from thin transparent green jade tiles, was punctured with tens of water tank-sized holes, giving off a sense of dilapidation. The strong wind pushed Wuxia into the grand hall. Suddenly, a bright light shone in front of his eyes, as a strong green wind came rolling and rolling along the ground, causing Wuqi's clothes to flutter violently. From the outside, the hall seemed to be less than an acre in size, but inside it was over 100 miles in both width and length. Thousands of huge green jade pillars were erected in the hall, carved with countless patterns of whirlwinds and clouds. All the pillars seemed to be rotating along with the wild wind. The ceiling of the great hall was a mysterious heavenly cycle star chart. The dark sky and the bright stars made everything look no different from the real sky. However, because of the dozens of holes on the ceiling, dozens of large holes, about 1 mile in diameter, were exposed in the star chart. Faint sunlight shone into the hall through the holes, making the star chart obscure. A powerful force was maintaining the operation of some restrictive spells in the palace, which kept the interstitial space in the palace stable. Looking at the dozens of large holes on the ceiling, Wuxia then glanced at the ring space that was still intact, and could only sigh inwardly. This place was indeed worthy of being the mansion of a primordial immortal, for it was indeed marvelous. Even though the primordial immortal had fallen, the mystery of this place was still not something Wuxia could see through. The wild wind rolled Wuxia up and pushed him forward. At the end of the hall, there was a cloud bed carved from white jade, and a faint, hazy figure was sitting cross-legged on it. Wuxia could roughly see that the figure was an old man with a thin face, with a pair of eyes as bright as the sun. But the aura emanating from the figure made Wuxia realize that the old man was not even a broken soul, and was not even as good as the wisp of soul left behind by Lady Dark Goldwater. This was just a projection. It was a projection left behind by the tremendous power of the fallen primordial immortal, leaving a mark in the orbit of the heavenly Tao. It was not a real living being, but it was, after all, the projection of a primordial immortal. Even though its master had fallen, it still possessed a very powerful power by relying on the various restrictive spells in the palace. Wuxia stepped forward, cupped his fist and bowed to the projection. "Senior, I'm Wuxia. Greetings." The projection opened its eyes, stared at Wuxia, and asked in a deep voice, "Are you a good man?" Wuxia was taken aback. After a moment of silence, he shook his head resolutely and said, "I'm not a good man. But I'm not a bad man either. If someone does not offend me, I will not offend them. But if someone offends me, I will think about it day and night, and I will seek revenge even if I have to. You are not a good man." The projection smiled faintly, nodded and said, "It's good that you are not a good man. In this world, good people will always suffer losses." The projection sighed faintly, then gave Wuxia a measuring look, and said in a low voice, "You have done the gales a favor?" Wuqi nodded, then told the projection how he saved Feng Xiaoxiao. Instinctively, he sensed that it was useless to lie in front of the projection. The grand hall was completely under the control of the projection. In this grand hall, the projection was an omnipotent god. If Wuqi told a lie, he would immediately be attacked by the restrictive spells in the grand hall with all their might. After listening to Wuqi, the projection smiled and said, "So, what do you think the wind represents?" Wuqi pondered for a brief moment, then said with a frown, "Wind represents freedom. Only the freely flowing air can evolve into wind." The projection applauded and praised, then sighed and said, "That's right, the core spirit of the wind is freedom. I've been upholding the path of freedom, and that's how I was able to comprehend the mystery of the wind between heaven and earth, finally achieving the realm of primordial immortal. Unfortunately, the Eastern Green Emperor sent an ancient heaven god, Fengbua, to ask me to serve the Eastern Celestial Court. How could I be willing to be ordered around by someone?" "The Eastern Green Emperor?" Wuqi took a deep breath. The projection sighed and said, "I refused the Green Emperor's imperial edict, and the 10 wind gods, rain gods, thunder gods, and lightning gods working under the Green Emperor attacked me together. 40 ancient heaven gods joined forces and severely wounded the 7th wind god, the 3rd rain god, the 2nd thunder god, and the 1st lightning god. But the Green Emperor himself struck me on the back and killed me." The projection sighed and said, "When you grow strong enough in the future, will you avenge me?" Wuqi frowned and pondered for a moment, then said frankly, "I'll do my best. If there's any danger, I won't take the risk to avenge you." The projection smiled, nodded seriously, and said, "That's very true, and I like it very much. That's great. Most of the treasures I carried with me when I was in a great battle in the past were destroyed. What I have left here are just some useless things. You can take whatever you like. I only have one scroll of the Song of Gale, which is what I've learned all my life, and the heavenly outfit of Gale, which is transformed from the wings I shed when I transformed into a primordial immortal. I'll leave these 2 things to you." The projection smiled faintly and said straightforwardly, "Freedom? But I'm just a projection and I'm trapped here. How can that be considered freedom? Once you take these things away, there will be no trace of me left in this world. Everything will be clean, and all restraints will be removed. That's what true freedom is." With a wave of his hand, a green wind mass flew whistling out from the center of the cloud bed, struck between Wuqi's brows, and quickly fused into his body. Wuqi felt a cold current spreading out from his spiritual ocean, and suddenly, an endless profound knowledge about the wind appeared before his eyes. All the knowledge about the wind, which the fallen primordial immortal had spent his entire life studying, belonged to Wuqi. At the same time, wisps of green wind mass drifted out from the surrounding jade pillars. Gradually, countless green winds merged and converged above Wuqi's head, gradually transforming into a pale green shadow of a wind. A gale about the size of a fist flew out from the shadow, gently wheeling a few times around Wuqi. Wuqi bit the tip of his tongue and carefully spat out a mouthful of prime blood essence. After a moment of hesitation, the gale flapped its wings and came before the drop of prime blood essence Wuqi spat out, swallowing it into its belly. Abruptly, the shadow of the wind above Wuqi's head transformed into a sheet of green light and fell onto Wuqi's body. His Taoist robe was torn to shreds, and a green Taoist robe that was visible to the naked eye was draped over Wuqi's body. The tiny gale gave a clear cry, burrowed into the Taoist robe, and fell into a deep sleep. Suddenly, Wuqi received a message from the item spirit of the heavenly outfit of Gale. It was badly damaged in the war years ago, and now it was only a middle-grade immortal item. Although it was willing to serve Wuqi now, in order to regain its original power as a primordial immortal treasure, Wuqi would need to slowly nourish and recover it. Wuqi nodded to himself, then cupped his fist and bowed deeply to the projection. The projection smiled faintly as a large number of green specks shot out of his body and slowly fused into Wuqi's body. A powerful wind spirit aura rushed into Wuqi's body. Every single cell of Wuqi's was filled with an enormous power of wind spirit. It took a full hour for the projection to finally vanish. Wuqi kowtowed a few times to the cloud bed, then strode out of the hall. Another debt of gratitude has been added to my debt. That's the Eastern Wood Emperor. Just the name alone tells me he's not easy to deal with. Wuqi's bitter laugh echoed faintly in the hall. Chapter 466. A white cloud streaked across the sky gracefully, surrounded by a gentle breeze that carried it forward like a fish swimming in the water. Wuqi sat cross-legged on the cloud, focusing all his mind on comprehending the Song of Gale, which was passed down to him by Reverend Gale, a primordial immortal, and learning the profound principles of wind that were as vast as the ocean. In Wuqi's spiritual ocean, a green ball of wind was wheeling and turning, sometimes slowly, sometimes quickly. Every time it spun, a new enlightenment would fuse into his mind. With every additional enlightenment he gained, Wuqi's understanding of the changes of the wind between heaven and earth would grow a little stronger, and the bloodline of the gale in his body would grow stronger. In the end, the breeze kept going in and out of Wuqi's body, pushing Wuqi forward as he hovered on the cloud. His speed was even faster than that of an ordinary heaven immortal, although it was not as fast as the gale, which could travel millions of miles in an instant. Among heaven immortals, no one could travel faster than Wuqi. The profound principle of the wind was freedom. The two wood elemental nascent souls in Wuqi's 7 stealing heaven meridians were constantly swallowing and emitting a large amount of green light. The wood elemental energy was easily transformed into wisps of gentle breeze that flowed ceaselessly through Wuqi's meridians. Wuqi's body became hazy, as if he was about to transform into a gentle breeze that blended into the heaven and earth. The surrounding natural energy also turned into wind and flowed toward Wuqi, quickly fusing into Wuqi's body. The Song of Gale is indeed marvelous. Wuqi opened his eyes and could not help but exclaim in admiration. It was a supreme scripture that could bring one straight to the realm of primordial immortal, and it was much more powerful than the Dark Water scripture, which could bring one straight to the realm of first-tier gold immortal. Currently, the two strongest cultivation techniques Wuqi had were the Song of Gale and the Dark Water scripture. Although the Inferno Hellfiend scripture could also be cultivated to the realm of gold immortal, it was still far from being comparable to these two cultivation techniques. If Wuqi wanted to break the profound soul captivating seal in his sea of consciousness, he would have to rely on the Song of Gale and the profound Water scripture. A few days ago, Wuqi searched the Gale Palace thoroughly, but found nothing. Apart from the Song of Gale and the heavenly robe of Gale, all the valuables in Venerable Gale's Gale Palace had been plundered by the ancient heaven gods led by the Azure Tharch. Wuqi had only found the remains of a few immortal stones in the Gale Palace's storeroom. This was all Wuqi had found in the Gale Palace. After leaving the Palace of Gale, Wuqi bid farewell to Lady Feng Qing'er and Feng Xiaoxiao. Lady Feng Qing'er sent an adult Gale to bring Wuqi back to the surface while she brought the naughty Feng Xiaoxiao back to her clan to teach him a lesson. As for whether Feng Xiaoxiao was going to kneel on a washboard or something else, it was not something that Wuqi could know. However, Wuqi knew that even if they never met again in the future, he would always remember Feng Xiaoxiao. Riding on the wind, Wuqi traveled back to Anhe City. He was not in a hurry, and just drifted slowly along with the wind. He focused all his attention on studying the Song of Gale, and in just a few days he had already comprehended some of its superficial mysteries. Then he formed a fake nascent soul in his body, using it to cultivate the cultivation technique in the Song of Gale. The fake nascent soul was entirely formed from emerald green gusts, drifting and hazy. Among all the fake nascent souls formed by Wuqi, its flying speed was definitely the fastest. When they were still several thousand miles away from Anhe City, Wuqi released 4 celestial fiend puppets. 2 of them transformed into Shui Xian and Shui Yi, while the other 2 transformed into the 2 boys Wuqi brought with him when he set out on this journey. The group of 5 returned to Greenwood Mountain in a leisurely manner. When they flew into Green City Manor, Wuqi saw Daoist Yunzong, who was busy deploying various illusory formations both inside and outside the mountain. He was afraid that his senior brother, Daoist Yunzong, would learn about what happened here and come here to seize the credit. Therefore, during the period of time when Wuqi was away, Daoist Yunzong had been working day and night to deploy various formations, trying his best to conceal the entire Green City courtyard. Wu Qi and Taoist Yunzong chatted for a while. With Shui Xian and Shui Yi as witnesses, Wu Qi actually sent a message to Reverend Li Yang through a voice transmission formation. Upon learning that Reverend Li Yang would be coming to Pangu continent together with a few elders of Green City, Taoist Yunzong could not help but feel wild with joy. Taking advantage of Taoist Yunzang's wild joy, Wu Qi coaxed Taoist Yunzong with a false show of affection. After that, he came up with an excuse that he had to go to Anhui City to prepare for the grand opening ceremony, when Reverend Li Yang arrived at Pangu continent 3 years later. After bidding farewell to Taoist Yunzong, who was reluctant to part with him, Wu Qi brought the two boys and returned to Anhui City. Shui Xian and Shui Yi, the two Taoists transformed from celestial fiend puppets, stayed in Green City Manor, keeping an eye on Taoist Yunzang's every move. Along the way, Wu Qi retracted the two puppets back into his body, then leisurely walked into Anhui City with his hands clasped behind his back. As they walked along the main road, before they could reach the city lord mansion, an old man selling sesame seed biscuits and steamed buns suddenly pointed his finger at Wu Qi and cried out excitedly, "He is Taoist greed! He is Taoist greed! Yeah, he is Taoist greed! My lords, he is Taoist greed!" Wu Qi was taken aback. There were many people in Anhui City who knew his Taoist name, Greed. Why did this old man point out his name so excitedly? While he was puzzled, a large group of armored warriors suddenly rushed out from the restaurants and inns on both sides of the road. Dozens of oracles from the Directorate of Celestials, clad in black burlap robes and black jade crowns, flew up into the sky with gloomy faces. Quickly, they crushed the bone talismans they had prepared in their hands, sprinkling a large sheet of white light onto the armored warriors. Wu Qi briefly analyzed the restrictive spells in the white light. Some were used to defend against soul attacks, some were used to defend against poisonous gas and miasma, and some were used to defend against sound wave attacks, strong light attacks, and all sorts of strange magical attacks. In short, the over 300 armored warriors who rushed out from the restaurants and inns on both sides of the road were armed to the teeth. The offensive magical attacks that Taoists were most adept at using, which had the greatest lethality against human warriors, had been weakened to the extreme. The sound of swords and blades being unsheathed rang out like the rumbling of a tidal wave. 300 warriors had surrounded Wu Qi, their blades like a forest of trees and swords like a rain, reflecting the sunlight and glinting with blinding light. A few young men, who did not emanate any aura, but were clad in golden armors and looked as mighty as lions, strode up to Wu Qi and gave Wu Qi a cold glance. A young man, who was wearing a golden armor and a large red cloak that was dyed with beast blood, had his hair tied up in a fiery jade crown on his head, and patterns of hundreds of beasts were drawn on his golden armor with melted red crystals. He took out a scroll from his waist, opened it, and looked at it carefully. Then he carefully compared Wu Qi's face with the portrait on the scroll. Shaking his head, the young man grinned coldly and said, "Taoist greed?" Wu Qi laughed dryly, nodded, and said, "That's me." The young man said coldly, "I'm Miao Yihu, the criminal officer of Zhong Province's punishment court in Diyu. Please cooperate with me. Otherwise, I have the right to kill you on the spot." Wu Qi paused, then gave the scroll a sideways glance. The portrait on the scroll was the same face Wu Qi used when he went to Qingsu Immortal Pass. Next to the scroll was a line of tiny neat characters, Taoist greed, a cultivation technique of the Fiend League, a height of 7 feet and 2 inches, and so on. Twitching his lips, Wu Qi turned to look at the old man, who was selling buns and steamed buns, and shouted out his name just now. The old man was happily taking over a heavy money bag from an armored warrior. Behind him, a group of men and women were busy loading some clothes and soft items into a large cart. Before long, the old man brought the group of men and women, and quickly drove the cart away joyfully. Meanwhile, the owner of the shop was sighing in a low voice, lamenting why he was not the first one to discover the trace of Wu Qi, the Taoist greed. Smiling bitterly, Wu Qi pointed at his own nose and asked, "May I ask, Lord Miao, what crime have I committed?" Miao Yihu cried out coldly, "A cultivator from the Fiend League who calls himself Taoist Greed has colluded with demons from outer domains and attacked the army of Prefecture Overseer Feng Jupin. He killed over 70,000 soldiers of Diyu Province, severely wounded the prefecture overseer and his generals, and even killed 347 oracles of the Directorate of Celestials. The prefecture overseer of Zhong province is furious, and he has issued an order to arrest Daoist greed. Staring coldly at Wuxia, Miaoyu grinned coldly and said, "You are the 9th Daoist greed that I found in the last half a month." Taken aback, Wuxia asked hastily, "What about the other few Daoist greed that I found?" Although Wuxia asked the question anxiously, he was smiling bitterly in his heart. Could it be that the Daoist name greed was so popular? If this Miao Yihu could find 9 Daoist greed, then what about the other criminal officers of the punishment court? TSK. But when he thought about it, there were countless cultivators in the myriad of heavenly realms. Apart from the Daoist names of those famous almighty experts, who no one dared to use, there were many other Daoist names like Qing Feng and Mingyu. The Daoist name greed corresponded to the heavenly star, and those cultivators from the Fiend League and the Evil League were fond of such Daoist names. Staring coldly at Wuxia, Miaoyu said in a deep voice, "The 8 Daoist greed in front of me thought they had a profound cultivation base, and refused to cooperate with me. Therefore they were all killed. One of them had a cultivation base of 34th tier heaven immortal, but he was still killed by me." Wuxia sucked in a cold breath, laughed dryly and said, "Doesn't that mean I'll have to change my Daoist name in the future?" Miaoyu said coldly, "That's a matter for the future. As for now, please summon your nascent soul out of your body, Daoist greed. I just want to see what kind of technique you're cultivating." Wuxia pointed at the words on the scroll and asked, "What if I'm unfortunate enough to be cultivating with a technique from the Fiend League?" Miaoyu's lips twitched into a fake smile as he said in an indifferent tone, "Then that would be really unfortunate. If you're cultivating with a technique from the Fiend League, you'll either be killed by me on the spot despite your stubborn resistance, or you'll follow me back to the punishment court of Zhong province and be investigated." Wuxia smacked his lips and cleared his throat. As he was about to say something bashfully, Reverend San Li's voice was heard coming from afar. "What a bold statement, Your Excellency. And He City is now Euphoria Heavenly Palace's territory, and you're trying to take away our outer sect elder in our territory? Where does Your Excellency put Euphoria Heavenly Palace? Where does Your Excellency put Patriarch Muji? Where does Your Excellency put Dark Palace?" When Miao Yihu arrived with his army, Wuxia had immediately contacted the celestial fiend puppet, who had transformed into Reverend San Li. Reverend San Li had arrived just in time, bringing with him all the cultivators from the City Lord Mansion who had a certain status. Riding on a gust of wind, nearly 1,000 cultivators arrived and surrounded Miao Yihu and his army of over 300 soldiers. Miao Yihu snorted coldly, then suddenly gave a sharp whistle. Immediately, many figures leaped up into the sky from a distance, as nearly 1,000 dark figures were seen rushing towards them from the 3 main roads behind the other 3 city gates. Before long, about 1,500 leather-armored soldiers, armed with powerful bows and crossbows, had surrounded the cultivators from the outside. Following these soldiers were over 100 oracles from the Directorate of Celestials hovering in midair. Chapter 467. The loud banging of doors and windows being shut could be heard coming from all over in He City. Grinning coldly, Miaoyu spun and looked at Reverend San Li, who was walking slowly down the street. He pulled out a round bone mirror and waved it at Reverend San Li. A faint gleam flashed across the surface of the mirror, polished from an unknown green bone, while an ancient-looking rune flickered on its surface. Suddenly, Reverend San Li's body swayed, and a sheet of green mist burst out from his body, amidst which came a faint ghost howl. Shaking his head, Miaoyu put away the bone mirror and said in a deep voice, "How dare a mere early-stage nascent soul cultivator talk to me like that?" He gave the crowd a scornful glance, then stretched out both hands and slowly drew a circle at the surrounding cultivators. "You are just a bunch of weaklings, and the strongest among you is merely a nascent soul cultivator. How dare you attack the army of punishment court of Du? I'll count to 10. Get the hell out of here." Reverend San Li snorted coldly as he parted the crowd, and came next to Miao Yihu. He lowered his voice and said, "Your Excellency, and He City is now the territory of Euphoria Heavenly Palace. Our ancestral master is Patriarch Muji, and behind him is Patriarch Xian Yi from the Dark Palace of Huiming Heavenly Realm. Miao Yihu put down the hands that he used to provoke the surrounding cultivators, then placed them forcefully on Reverend San Li's shoulder. He came before Reverend San Lu, staring into his eyes and said with a cold grin, "This is the territory of Dayu. The celestial court rules the immortals, and the human emperors rules the humans. This is a universally acknowledged heavenly commandment." Reverend San Lu took a deep breath. He looked at Miao Yihu's hands on his shoulder, then sighed and said, "But now He City is the territory of a mortal sect. If Your Excellency does not wish to trigger a war between humans and immortals, please do not act recklessly in He City." Miao Yihu's eyelids drooped as a strange smile emerged on his gaunt and slightly gruesome face. He loosened his grip and ignored Reverend San Lu, then turned to Wuxia and said, "Taoist greed, let me have a look at your nascent soul. If you are a fiend cultivator, come with me. If you're not a devil cultivator, don't use the Taoist name of greed in the future. I'll let you off for now." Wu Qi pondered for a moment. Then a white cloud rushed out from the top of his head. It was the fake nascent soul who cultivated the scripture of inaction. A crescent moon-shaped machete was hovering above the fake infant's head, looking hazy as if it was condensed from water vapor. Occasionally, the machete would spin and shoot out beams of bright light. The crescent-shaped blade was also a spirit weapon given to Wu Qi by Immortal Greenstaff when he left Green Cliff Planet. It was forged using magical smoke cloud crystal and 5 elements gold essences, giving it a hazy and dreamy glow, a perfect match for the inaction scripture of unity. The Guthuan Wuwei Dao scripture was an orthodox Taoist cultivation technique. Moreover, it emphasized on cultivating one's nature and heart. It was in line with the most primitive essence of Taoism. As soon as Wu Qi's nascent soul flew out of his body, it was surrounded by a clear air, and clouds were hovering and dancing around his body in the shape of Ganoderma, dragon and tiger. Wu Qi's long hair was waving in the wind, and he looked refreshed and energetic. He looked exactly like a genuine Taoist, an orthodox and virtuous man. Miao Yihu's face darkened abruptly. He gave Wu Qi's nascent soul sitting cross-legged amidst the cloud above his head a glance, snorted coldly, waved his hand, and cried out in a deep voice, "Heed my order, men. Form up and leave He City." One after another, the armor-clad soldiers sheathed their blades and swords, loosened the triggers of their strong bows and crossbows, and put their weapons into the leather bags they carried on their backs. Then they lined up on the street and marched toward the city gate. The punishment army of the punishment court was well trained, and every one of them was an elite soldier. It only took them a few breaths of time to line up and leave through the east gate. Miao Yihu shoved the scroll back into his belt, smiled and nodded at Wu Qi. After that, he brought a few adjutants and personal guards and followed the procession out of the city. Off in the distance, 3 flying ships were seen heading toward He City at top speed. They were here to pick up the army led by Miao Yihu. With a smile on his face, Miao Yihu led the army out of the city. But the moment he stepped out of the city gate, he turned his head and said with a loud laugh, "Reverend San Lu, Taoist greed, remember, this is Dayu's territory. You are just staying here temporarily. Sooner or later, Dayu will take back this place." The 3 flying ships landed, and Miao Yihu boarded them with many soldiers. Amidst a faint whistling of the wind, the ships broke through the clouds and soared into the sky, then slowly flew toward the south. Footsteps were heard, as Zhu Linggong, who stayed behind in He City, came hurrying toward them with his soldiers. Upon seeing Wu Qi, Zhu Linggong quickly cupped his fist, bowed and said, "Senior, was that the punishment officer from Zhong Province's punishment court just now? You have to be careful, as the people of punishment court never have a good reputation. Once you get tangled up with them, they will be like maggots on a tarsal bone. Things will not end so easily." Wu Qi was taken aback. Then he smiled and said, "But I think that Miao Yihu is a reasonable man. I'm not a fiend cultivator, so he just left without any hesitation." Zhu Linggong shook his head with a wry smile and said in a low voice, "When did the people of punishment court ever talk about reason?" Looking at the bitter smile on Zhu Linggong's face, Wu Qi's heart skipped a beat. As Zhu Lingong's clan had lost their control over Anhui City, apart from Zhu Lingong and his branch who served as the city guards, the rest of the clan were exiled. Zhu Lingong should have a very deep understanding of the punishment court's methods. Judging from that, Miao Yihu would not let Wu Qi go so easily. After a brief moment of pondering, Wu Qi smiled and patted Zhu Lingong's shoulder. Beiji is doing well, and he is recuperating well in City Lord Mansion. Don't worry, I'll take good care of him. I'm sure he will have a bright future. While smiling, Wu Qi gave Reverend Sanlu a meaningful glance. Reverend Sanlu whistled, and all the cultivators scattered in all directions. Stepping on a cloud, Wu Qi and Reverend Sanlu flew quickly towards the City Lord Mansion. However, halfway through their journey, Wu Qi summoned a celestial fiend puppet and transformed it into his image, following Reverend Sanlu back to the City Lord Mansion. Meanwhile, Wu Qi himself transformed into a gust of wind and chased after the 3 flying ships. After obtaining the legacy of the Song of Gale, Wu Qi could fly at a very fast speed. In less than an hour, he had traveled over 10,000 miles towards the south. Far ahead of him, he saw 3 flying ships descending into a valley. A few plumes of smoke could be seen rising from the valley, and Wu Qi could smell the aroma of grilled meat and cooked rice brought to him by the wind. It was an inconspicuous valley amidst a vast mountain range. It stretched 3 to 5 miles, and there was a spring in the valley. Nearly 100 soldiers were grilling meat and cooking rice by the spring, while several hundred tents were erected in a small forest off to the side. Some soldiers were patrolling the area with swords and spears in their hands. The 3 flying ships descended, and Miao Yihu alighted from them with a gloomy face. He brought a few adjutants and personal guards into one of the tents. Wu Qi followed closely behind Miao Yihu, and with the innate earth element escape art, he entered the tent as well. He hid in the mud less than 3 feet deep under Miao Yihu's feet, narrowing his eyes to listen to the commotion above. There was a long table made of black stone placed in the tent, and Miao Yihu and his 4 adjutants were casually seated around it. A personal guard brought them a cup of boiling hot tea. Miao Yihu picked up the cup and finished it in one gulp, not fearing that it was scalding. After that, he pulled out the sword hanging on his waist and hacked it forcefully on the long table. A crisp sound rang out as the sword went over 1 foot deep into the table. Miao Yihu loosened his grip on the hilt, and the sword vibrated violently on the table, producing a deep, muffled cry. This Taoist greed is the one who His Excellency Prefecture Overseer ordered to arrest. Miao Yihu pulled out the scroll hanging on his waist and slammed it forcefully on the table. You have all seen it with your own eyes today. This Taoist greed's nascent soul is a nascent soul of Fiend League. Even if he is not that Taoist greed, he still has an unclear relationship with that Taoist greed. Chi-Chi, the 4 adjutants, rose to their feet, bowed their heads and cried out in a deep voice. Your Excellency is right. This Taoist greed is the criminal His Excellency Prefecture Overseer ordered to arrest. Miao Yihu gave a deep snort. Sitting back in his seat, he gently scratched the edge of his sword with his finger while murmuring to himself. Since this Taoist greed is the same Taoist greed, I have an excuse to mobilize the army and besiege Anhui City. Euphoria Heavenly Palace and Golden Pavilion Temple have perished together. Patriarch Muji is severely wounded, and Arhut Wrath is dead. Who else in the vicinity of Anhui City can fight against the Great Yu army? Lightly tapping on the stone table with his finger, Miao Yihu said in a low voice, I knew that Lu Yi was not reliable. Tactics, stratagems, what is the use of these things? Power, only the mighty power can decide everything. If anyone dares to stand in our way, we will destroy him with violence. This is the righteous path under the heaven. Grinning coldly, Miao Yihu pursed his lips and said in a low voice, Third brother, watch how I will avenge you. Amir Anhui City has caused the death of my younger brother, who shares the same father and mother. How can I not avenge him? One of the adjutants cautiously reminded him, Your Excellency, with your current authority, you can only mobilize an army of less than 2,000 soldiers. This is more than enough to take down the current Anhui City. But if Patriarch Muji sends out his disciples to help us, I'm afraid we won't be able to withstand his revenge. Hiding under the ground, Wu Qi narrowed his eyes. Miao Yihu was going to avenge his younger brother? Could his younger brother be the young general whom he had killed? At that time, Wuxia was too lazy to find out the identity and background of that man as he was busy framing Yu Miao. Thus, he killed him with a casual swing of his sword. He did not expect that the man was backed by Miao Yihu, who was now eagerly coming here to avenge his younger brother by abusing his authority. Miao Yihu narrowed his eyes and shook his head. "Let's take down Anhe City first," he said in a deep voice. "We don't need to interfere in the rest. As long as we spread the news that Taoist greed is related to Patriarch Muji, His Excellency Prefecture Overseer will naturally uphold justice for us." The four adjutants exchanged a glance, then clenched their right fists and punched their own chests as they answered in one voice. "Your Excellency is wise. We will definitely succeed." Miao Yihu smiled faintly. While he was about to reveal his overall plan, a loud explosion was suddenly heard coming from outside. A strong gust of wind brought with it a scorching flame, and the tent was abruptly caught on fire and burned to ashes. Miao Yihu sprung to his feet and glanced around. The valley had turned into a living hell. A black-bearded Taoist was seen standing on a cloud, holding a dragon skin fire pouch in his hand. He was constantly firing thunderbolts into the valley. Whenever a thunderbolt landed on the ground, it would produce a flaming cloud that covered an area of several tens of acres. Strong winds and scorching heat swept across the place. The armored soldiers were either ripped to shreds by the explosions, or their bones and flesh were charred by the scorching flame. Some soldiers were even howling miserably as they ran wildly in all directions, their skin and flesh crackling noisily, while the fat under their skin melted into human oil and flowed out from their wounds. Flustered and exasperated, Miao Yihu pointed his finger at the Taoist and snapped, "Why did you attack us so cruelly?" The Taoist smiled faintly, then gave Miao Yihu an expressionless look and said in a low voice, "So there are still 5 stronger ants? Not bad." With a wave of his hand, several dozens of thunderbolts flew whistling towards Miao Yihu and the others. Chapter 468. Miao Yihu could not care less about his adjutant and personal guards. Instead, he put his hands over his face and curled up his body. A plume of dark smoke towered into the sky from behind him, amidst which, the soul of an alligator, nearly 1,000 feet long, gradually emerged, howling into the sky. The dense water vapor in the surrounding air rolled and converged towards Miao Yihu, forming a thin armor compressed from water element energy and donning it. Dozens of thunderbolts the size of water tanks exploded, shredding Miao Yihu's adjutants and personal guards into pieces. Severed limbs shot out in all directions, and when the scorching flames swept across them, they were burned to a sizzling sound and turned into ashes in just a blink of an eye. The black-bearded Taoist let out a strange laugh as he unleashed a torrent of thunderbolts, turning the valley into a living hell. Nearly 2,000 soldiers brought here by Miao Yihu were killed, and only a dozen oracles with the strongest cultivation base were still alive. Protected by the bone talismans, they sprung into the sky amidst a large sheet of white light and attempted to flee. "You can't escape. You can't escape." The black-bearded Taoist roared with laughter. He pointed his right hand out, and a dozen beams of flame shot out. Wrapped in each beam was a spirit talisman the size of a palm, crafted from a fire elemental energy stone of excellent quality, the flaming mist stone. The thin talisman was densely carved with countless runes the size of mung beans and shaped like rising flames, emanating a powerful spiritual pressure. The talismans accurately struck the bodies of the fleeing oracles. The white light from the bone talismans was shattered by the talismans, and the talismans sank deep into the bodies of the oracles. Shrill and miserable howls rang out one after another, as dense and sticky red flames burned out of the oracles' bodies and slowly engulfed them. The red flames rolled silently, and the bodies of these priests turned into ashes in the flames. Arg! Arg! Amidst a furious roar, Miao Yihu, whose hair and eyebrows were all gone and his golden armor melted by the fire, leaped out of the flames. The alligator behind him transformed into a stream of dark watery light and fused with his body. Abruptly, he threw his head back and gave a long howl into the sky. His body grew to 50 feet tall, and his fair skin turned a bizarre greenish-black color, with patterns that looked like the scales of an alligator vaguely emerging under his skin. Die. Miao Yihu clenched his right hand into a fist, with the knuckle of his middle finger sticking out like a phoenix's eye. The fist pierced through the air as Miao Yihu used the force to protrude his body, and appeared in front of the black-bearded Taoist in a flash. A sheet of flame spread out from the black-bearded Taoist's body, and a palm-sized shield appeared in front of his chest. It did not have a physical body, but looked like it was condensed from flames, constantly twisting and rippling. The shield was round in shape, and in the middle of the shield was a deep dragon eye. When the huge eyeball blinked, a large sheet of flame would shoot out, transforming into dozens of fiery serpents and biting towards Miao Yihu with ear-piercing whistling noises. Suddenly, Miao Yihu's body shrunk back to his original size. A dark fist force that shone with a blinding light burst out of his right fist and smashed viciously onto the shield. It was as if he had shrunk his body from 50 feet tall to 8 or 9 feet tall, forcing out all his blood essence to transform into the fist force and blast out of his body. A loud boom rang out, and a few large cracks appeared on the shield. The black-bearded Taoist gave a muffled snort as the corner of his eye suddenly cracked, with a dozen drops of bright red blood spraying out. The flame shrouding the black-bearded Taoist dimmed abruptly, as Miao Yihu's fist smashed viciously onto his chest. The black-bearded Taoist cried out in pain. His eyes went wide, and a large sheet of green flame burst out from his eyes. The blood that flowed out from the corner of his eye just now fused with the green flame, giving it a stronger power. The green flame stuck to Miao Yihu's skin like a piece of burning rubber, burning wildly. The temperature of the flame was extremely high, and no matter how hard Miao Yihu tried to control his beast's soul and absorb the water element energy, he could not extinguish the flame. Wuxia stealthily poked his head out from behind a rock and shook his head. The flame that sprayed out from the black-bearded Taoist's eyes was the prime true flame that he had cultivated with his life, the external manifestation of the yang energy of an immortal. The prime true flame was extremely powerful. Usually, when an immortal refined the prime true flame, they would only use it to forge their prime immortal items, or to defend themselves against fiends. Which immortal would be willing to spew out the prime true flame to attack the enemy unless it was a critical moment? Miao Yihu's punch had seriously wounded the black-bearded Taoist. The green flame burned quietly. Miao Yihu hissed and shrieked in pain, no longer having the strength to attack the enemy. His broken armor melted, his robe turned into ashes, and his skin turned into wisps of green smoke that drifted away in the air amidst the burning of the green flame. The flame quietly burned his muscles layer by layer, then his nerves, blood vessels, and bones. In just the time it took to finish a pot of tea, Miao Yihu's flesh and bones had turned into ashes, and his soul was imprisoned by the green flame. The black-bearded Taoist grinned hideously as he pointed his right finger at the green flame. The flame transformed into a bell-shaped halo and flew up into the sky. Right in the center of the halo was a fist-sized soul that looked identical to Miao Yihu. The flame slowly burned Miao Yihu's soul, causing him to keep letting out miserable and shrill howls. The howls could not be heard by human ears, and only nascent divinity could sense the shrill and despairing howls coming from the surrounding void. After a full quarter of an hour, when Miao Yihu's soul had suffered all sorts of pain, the black-bearded Taoist finally clenched his right hand and crushed the green halo, destroying Miao Yihu's broken soul. The black-bearded Taoist let out a strange laugh and said, "How dare you hurt my immortal treasure and my immortal body? Hee, having your soul destroyed is the lightest punishment. TSK, 3 flying ships." The black-bearded Taoist put away the dragon skin fire sack that was spewing out a boundless flame, folded it, and shoved it into a secret pocket hanging on his waist. Then, he landed happily before the 3 flying ships that were parked in the valley. He patted on the ship and said smilingly, "Wonderful. These are flying ships made from flying cloudwood, a 3rd-grade flying ship. Flying cloudwood is also an excellent material for crafting flying chariots. Even if these 3 ships are dismantled and sold, they will be worth at least 2 immortal stones." Wuxia blinked his eyes as he stared at the black-bearded Taoist. Could this man be a robber? While he was wondering where this black-bearded Taoist came from, Wuxia's mind was suddenly alerted. He gave a cold snort and leaped forward, passing through the rock in front of him like a ghost. With a blink of his body, Wuqi teleported himself several hundred feet away with a short distance teleportation, then flipped his body and thrust out a dot of dragon scale-shaped light. Amidst an ear-splitting whistling noise, the dragon scale-shaped light had just flown over 80 feet away when a very fine red line came shooting over from the sky, colliding fiercely with it. Followed by a clear cracking sound, the dragon-scaled golden light was pushed back, while the red line was cut in half by the dragon-scaled golden light, turning into two broken needles that fell to the ground while emitting a faint white mist. Wuqi spun and looked behind him, and saw a pretty and adorable little girl, who was about 7 or 8 years old, landing gracefully on the rock where he was hiding just now. She was clad in a moon-white Taoist dress that bared her fair arms. She had big eyes and a small mouth, making her look like a cute and adorable snow doll. Her hair was tied into 2 buns, and her mouth was pouting, while her eyes were quickly filled with tears. She stared at Wuqi, then suddenly burst into tears and said, "Uncle Beard, he broke the 3 flame divine needles you gave me. Ugh, the person who sneaked up on me is such a little girl?" Wuqi quickly exercised his mystic eyes of universe, and gave the little girl a glance. She was indeed a real little girl, with a cultivation base that had just stepped into Xiantian realm, and was just at the level where she could control a magical item. Not only that, she had an excellent bone structure and aptitude, and there was a ring of bright light emanating from her body. Obviously, she was practicing a very orthodox cultivation technique from the Taoist League, and it was a very advanced technique. Her bones were tender and fragile, and she was a real little girl, not a little monster disguised with the soul of a 10,000-year-old demon, and not a demon transformed from some mountain spirit or water monster. Her fleshly body and soul were tightly fused together, and her foundation was not shaken at all. Apparently, both her soul and fleshly body were original, and she was not an unlucky girl who was possessed by a demon soul or a demon ghost. Laughing dryly, Wuqi raised both hands in the air and said, "Don't cry, it's just a misunderstanding." The black-bearded Taoist had come behind Wuqi. He sneered and said, "Misunderstanding?" Wuqi spun, nodded at the Taoist and said, "This little girl sneaked up on me with a flying needle, and I was just trying to protect myself." The Taoist was taken aback. His eyes went wide as he snapped at the little girl. "Shuemei, were you the one who attacked first?" The little girl, Shuemei, squatted down and played with a few pebbles on the rock with her little hands. She bowed her head and murmured, "I saw him sneakily peeping at you from behind the rock, and I thought he was one of those people's accomplices, so I gave him a needle. But in the end, I don't know what kind of powerful treasure it is, but it managed to cut the 3 flame divine needle." The black-bearded Taoist turned to look at Wuqi, then suddenly cupped his fist and bowed solemnly. "Fellow Taoist, I am Supremacy 3 Flame from Wandering Immortal Hall of Myriad Immortal Alliance. Shuemei is an orphan daughter left behind by my best friend, and I've been pampering her since she was a child. Please forgive me if I have offended you in any way." Likewise, Wuqi cupped his fist and bowed respectfully as he said, "I'm Taoist greed." Supremacy 3 Flame's expression turned extremely strange. He glanced at the broken marks on the ground, laughed dryly and said, "Taoist greed? Did you follow them here? Hee, your name has been resounding across Zhong province for the past few days." Shuemei sprung to her feet, clapped her hands and said with a smile, "Taoist greed? The Taoist greed that the old prefecture overseer of Zhong province, Feng Lingling, issued an arrest warrant for?" Shuemei gave Wuqi a pitying look, sighed and said, "Over the past few days, Shuemei has learned that a few unlucky fellows with the same name have been captured and killed by the punishment court. Some of them are called Fei Lang, Hei Lang, Qing Lang, and other Taoists with names related to the character wolf, but they have all fled from Zhong province." Wuqi laughed dryly, shook his head and said, "What an unexpected calamity. This is truly an unexpected calamity." While laughing, Wuqi was pondering in his mind, what is the background of this Myriad Immortal Alliance? Myriad Immortal Alliance, Wandering Immortal Hall. Clearly, this Myriad Immortal Alliance is a decent organization. At least, its internal structure is considered complete. While he was pondering, Wuqi was struck dumb. The celestial fiend puppet he left in Anhe City, disguised as his true form, had suddenly sent him a message. An immortal who claimed to be the emissary of the ascending immortal hall of Myriad Immortal Alliance had found Wuqi's celestial fiend puppet and conveyed the intention of recruiting him. Chapter 469. While Wuqi was chasing after Miao Yihu and his companions for a distance of 10,000 miles, back in Anhe City, his celestial fiend puppets were watching the absurd scene happening in the back garden of the city lord mansion helplessly. Hundreds of flowers were blooming in the vast back garden, and the grass was green like a carpet. A restrictive barrier with a Buddhist light had shrouded the entire back garden, preventing anyone from peeping into it. Beneath the Buddhist light, Lao Ai, who had become addicted to playing tricks, had a golden relic pagoda 13 stories high above his head and a pink lotus throne under his feet. A large wheel of delight was hovering behind his head, emanating a vast Buddhist light, and displaying countless enchanting scenes of the great happiness Zen technique. Wuqi knew the origin of the Golden Relic Pagoda. It was a feng shui pagoda found in the back mountain of Golden Pavilion Temple, a treasure used to stabilize the geomancy of the world. When Wuqi was ransacking the treasures of Golden Pavilion Temple, Lao Ai's sharp eyes and quick hands had snatched the pagoda, making it his personal collection. The pagoda was decorated with relics left behind by the past abbot of Golden Pavilion Temple, and there were over 1,000 relics embedded in the 13-storied pagoda. It was a genuine extraordinary treasure of the Buddhist League. After being refined by Lao Ai with his great sun magic, the bright light emitted by the pagoda was imbued with an evil power that could bewitch one's mind. Currently, several dozens of enchanting girls were swaying in the bright light emitted by the pagoda. Together with the countless flying girls on the Wheel of Delight, they were putting on a show of undisguised joy. Madman Shui was sitting cross-legged off to the side, exercising his cultivation technique quietly. His soul had fused with the Wheel of Delight, and he was having sex with those flying girls. But his fleshly body was as calm as still water. The stream of primary yang flame surged out from his soul and circulated around his body, stimulating Madman Shui's 9 dragons embracing pillar. Roiling blood and energy kept flowing through his meridians, and under the nourishment of this blood and energy, Madman Shui's fleshly body gradually grew stronger and stronger, and his mind became clearer and clearer. It was a cultivation technique unique to the mystic art Lao Ai was cultivating, and Wuqi had nothing to say about it. But the worst thing was that the little disciple Wuqi had just taken in, Ba Jia, was currently lying on the bellies of 3 young girls who were lying in a row. He was looking at the heavenly demon dance around him helplessly. Dense evil energy flowed endlessly into Ba Jia's forehead. Half of the cracks on the sarira on his forehead had already healed. However, the once smooth and round sarira that was glowing with a pure white Buddhist light was now tinged with a layer of pink. Poor Ba Jia still had the memories of his past life. He flailed his arms and legs in terror, trying to free himself from the 3 naked girls beneath him and escape this hell of cosmetics. But the 3 young girls were grabbing his little arms and legs with their tender jade hands, playing with his small and fragile body. How could he escape? Bit by bit, the innate Buddhist nature was melted away by Lao Ai's ravaging. What was left in Beiji's mind? Who knew what it was? The celestial fiend puppet stared blankly at the absurd scene before his eyes. It took him a long time to come to his senses. After all, he was only a puppet controlled by a thread of Wuqi's divine will. Without Wuqi's control, his ability to adapt to changes was still a little lacking. On the other hand, after cultivating the celestial fiend battle the heaven script, a cultivation technique of the fiend Dao, the puppet's divine will had become cruel and had lost some of its human touch. After a brief analysis, the puppet instinctively felt that Lao Ai's behavior toward Ba Jia would not cause any harm to Wuqi. Therefore, after a brief moment of pondering, the puppet turned and walked out of the back garden, ignoring the pitiful and pleading look Ba Jia gave him. Be it the fiend Dao, the Buddhist Dao, or the evil Dao, they all lead to the same destination. At the end of the day, Buddha and fiend are one, and the Tao and the evil Tao are one. The Tao of heaven and earth is right there. No matter which path you choose, the destination will always be the same. The puppet murmured in a low voice, clasping his hands behind his back as he walked out of the back garden. Right after he walked out of the back garden, a figure flashed before his eyes. A Taoist clad in a black Taoist robe, a pair of black gloves made from netherworm silk, and a mask forged from black metal, engraved with exquisite and magnificent patterns, appeared out of thin air in front of the puppet. The Taoist's voice was deep and powerful, filled with a strange, bewitching power that sounded like a nightmare from hell. "Fellow Taoist greed?" asked the Taoist in a slow and gentle voice. The puppet raised his head and murmured in a similarly slow voice, "Strange, the defensive mechanism of the City Lord Mansion is personally constructed by me." The Taoist laughed, nodded and said, "It is a very ingenious restrictive mechanism, a formation with a nearly perfect structure. Fellow Taoist greed, I admire your attainments in the Tao of formations and restrictive mechanisms." With a flip of his palm, the Taoist took out a palm-sized talisman made from the shell of some spirit turtle, and said in a deep voice, "This is a formation-breaking talisman crafted by a gold immortal grandmaster in the Tao of formation. Unless it is constructed by a gold immortal, it can be easily bypassed." The puppet was surprised and asked, "Bypassing the formation with brute force?" TSK, a gold immortal grandmaster in the Tao of formation? The Taoist put away the formation-breaking talisman, put both hands under his sleeves, nodded and said, "Yes, bypassing the formation with brute force. I am Buyunzi, the ascending immortal emissary of myriad immortal alliances ascending immortal hall. My mission is to search for fellow Taoists who have the potential to join myriad immortal alliance. Today, with fellow Taoist greed's current situation, you are a very promising ally for myriad immortal alliance. I wonder if fellow Taoist is interested in joining the wandering immortal hall of myriad immortal alliance?" Immediately, the puppet sent the message to Wuxia himself. Unlike the hell that Beiji was suffering from, the recruitment from myriad immortal alliance could have a great impact on Wuxia himself. Instinctively, the puppet sent the message. Immediately Wuqi's order was sent back. The puppet smiled faintly, cupped his fist and said to Buyunzi, "May I ask fellow Taoist, what is the origin of this myriad immortal alliance?" Buyunzi nodded his head, and with the same slow and gentle tone, he explained the origin of myriad immortal alliance to the puppet. As the name suggested, myriad immortal alliance was a casual alliance formed by a large number of immortals. Among these immortals, there were itinerant cultivators, immortals from powerful immortal sects, and even immortal officials from the celestial court, as well as some other extraordinary people. The purpose of Myriad Immortal Alliance was to create a platform for information sharing, resource exchange, intelligence exchange, and mutual benefit, so that all the allies who joined the alliance could get the greatest help. The allies of Myriad Immortal Alliance were divided into several levels, and according to the contribution they made to the alliance, a spirit herb, an immortal pill, or a piece of valuable information could be converted into a detailed number of contribution points. According to the amount of contribution points, one could upgrade one's level in Myriad Immortal Alliance, and once one's level was upgraded, one could use the contribution points to ask for help from the alliance, to complete some tasks that were beyond one's capabilities. Myriad Immortal Alliance had a huge hidden power. Not only were there high officials from the Celestial Court hiding among them, there were also ghost kings and ghost saints from the ghost realm, demon kings and demon emperors from the demon realm, arhats and bodhisattvas from the Buddhist League, and even some important ministers from the Yu dynasty. Therefore, as long as the alliance's level was high enough, and they had enough contribution points, they could trade with the alliance. There was once an ally of Myriad Immortal Alliance, who had just ascended to the immortal realm, obtained a high position in the Celestial Court, and successfully took control of an upper-grade heavenly realm. The puppet looked at Buyunzi with surprise and said, "Don't tell me we don't have to pay any price for so many benefits?" Buyunzi smiled faintly and said, "Myriad Immortal Alliance is a loose alliance. Apart from not attacking allies at will, there are no other restrictions. As long as allies communicate with each other, they will earn contribution points. For example, fellow Taoist greed, if you pick a spirit herb and hand it over to the merchant run by Myriad Immortal Alliance for auction, the merchant will take a certain amount of commission from the auction, which will be converted into a certain amount of contribution points." Buyunzi laughed, then continued to explain. From time to time, the Alliance will issue various missions, such as collecting certain materials, gathering certain information, and so on. As long as fellow Daoists can complete these missions, you will be rewarded with a huge amount of contribution points. As the saying goes, everyone for me, and I for everyone. This is the core principle of Myriad Immortal Alliance. Everyone for me, and I for everyone? The puppet chuckled and asked straightforwardly. May I ask who is the leader of the Union of 10,000 Immortals? Buyunzi fell into silence. After a long while he nodded and said, Fellow Daoist Greed is indeed a knowledgeable man. As for who exactly is the leader of Myriad Immortal Alliance, I have no idea. However, it goes without saying that the leader must be an almighty expert. Apart from the leader, Myriad Immortal Alliance also has an elder council, and all the elders are extraordinary figures. They are the cornerstone of Myriad Immortal Alliance. After a brief moment of silence, the puppet asked in a deep voice, Why did fellow Daoist come to me? Buyunzi said bluntly, Because fellow Daoist Greed is in trouble, isn't it? Not every cultivator in Myriad Immortal Alliance will pay him a visit and invite him to join us. Firstly, he has the potential, and secondly, he needs our Myriad Immortal Alliance. Once these two conditions are met, the Ascending Immortal Hall's immortal emissary will naturally come forward to invite him. The puppet laughed dryly, then pointed at himself and asked, Could it be that Myriad Immortal Alliance thinks that I have the potential? Buyunzi nodded and said, The area 1,000,000 miles around Inhi City is now the territory of Euphoria Heavenly Palace. This is the potential that fellow Daoist has. The puppet asked immediately, The person who is in charge of Euphoria Heavenly Palace now is Reverend San Le. Buyunzi chuckled and said, Why do you say that, fellow Daoist Greed? Reverend San Le, is he really the person who is in charge of Euphoria Heavenly Palace now? Taking a deep breath, the puppet smiled bitterly and said, It seems like you are indeed well informed. Buyunzi nodded his head seriously and said in a deep voice, Naturally, Ascending Immortal Hall has allies who can gather and analyze information. Inhi City is a great foundation, and Euphoria Heavenly Palace and Golden Pavilion Temple are in a fierce conflict. How can we not pay attention to it? After pondering for a long while, the puppet smiled and said, If I kill Reverend San Lu and replace him, I wonder. Buyunzi smiled and said, Myriad Immortal Alliance has all kinds of people, including demons, fiends, ghosts, freaks, deities, saints, immortals, Buddhas, and all kinds of people. As long as our allies do not attack each other, we don't care about anything else. Clapping his hands, the puppet smiled and said, That would be great. I have no choice but to join this Myriad Immortal Alliance. Buyunzi laughed, then casually handed over a palm-sized, round iron medallion to the puppet. The iron medallion was extremely heavy, as it must have been fused with 5 elements gold essences that had been refined and compressed. The small iron medallion weighed at least 50 kilograms. The surface of the iron medallion was engraved with a picture of a gathering of myriad immortals, while the back was engraved with a picture of a dragon and a cloud. Between the cloud and the dragon, 3 tiny golden characters were engraved. Myriad Immortal Alliance. Buyunzi handed over a jade slip to Wuxia, then gave him a few words in a deep voice. After that, his body flickered and vanished abruptly, just like how he came. The puppet received the jade slip, gave it a glance with his divine will, and was struck with a great joy. In the valley, Wuxia, who was talking with Supremacy 3 Flame, was also struck with a great joy, and nearly burst out laughing. Chapter 470. The jade slip given to the puppet by Buyunzi contains some simple information about Myriad Immortal Alliance, including the addresses of several hundred merchant guilds on Pango continent, as well as the maps of the few provinces in the vicinity where these merchant guilds were located. Just this one map alone contained the geographical maps of over 1,000 provinces in Diyu, and it was a great help to Wuxia. Among the maps of over 1,000 provinces, Wuxia found a place mentioned in the Scroll of Stealing, Mount Lei Ming, which was the most remote province, in the Atlas of Xian province. According to the Scroll of Stealing, there was a natural extraordinary tree, the green leaf thunder vine, that had just sprouted and grown in Mount Thunderbright. Wuqi had no idea how it was doing now. If a natural spirit item like the green leaf thundervine was used to craft a magical treasure, its power would be comparable to that of an innate spirit item. Wuqi laughed complacently. The names of Mount Thunderbright and the few surrounding places were exactly the same as the records in the Scroll of Stealing. Wuqi felt relieved immediately. It seemed like the records in the Scroll of Stealing were still useful and reliable. Cupping his fist and bowing deeply to Supremacy 3 Flame, Wuqi smiled and said, "Greed was being too reckless just now. I hope fellow Taoists won't take it to heart. Little Shuemei, what is the grade of your 3-flame divine needle? A magical treasure? A spirit item?" Shuemei rolled her eyes and gave Wuqi a glare. Supremacy 3 Flame's face blushed as he laughed dryly and said, "I crafted that 3-flame divine needle for Shuemei to play with. It is not a magical treasure or a spirit item. It is just an ordinary magical item." While laughing, Wuqi flipped his palm and pulled out a middle-grade spirit item, Green Melon Thorn. They were crafted by immortal Greenstaff's wife, Goddess Green Melon, using the poisonous thorns of a 30,000-year-old dragon-striped serpent rattan mixed with green scale stones. Each of them was 1 foot and 2 inches long, and as thin as a strand of hair. Once they were activated, they would turn into 33 green beams, each measuring over 100 feet long, shooting across the sky at an incredible speed without making any noise. Once they struck a human body, the paralyzing poisonous gas of the dragon-striped serpent rattan would invade the body, numbing both the cultivator's corporeal body and nascent divinity. Unless one possessed an extremely good fire attribute magical treasure, other magical treasures such as metals and jades would not be able to restrain the blue demonic thorn. After it was completed, Patriarch Yuan Hua took it to the heart-cleansing pool behind Green Cliff Mountain and refined it for 300 years. Although it could only be considered as a mid-grade spirit item because its item spirit was not strong enough, its foundation was strong enough to be ranked as an immortal item. If it was carefully nourished and refined with nascent divinity, it would have a very high chance of evolving into an immortal item in the future. Shoving the set of blue demonic thorn into Shuemei's little hand, Wuqi smiled and said, "This is my fault. I have no intention of damaging little Shuemei's beloved item. This set of blue prickles was given to me by the seniors of my sect. I'll give it to little Shuemei to protect herself." Initially, Wuqi almost blurted out the name of the blue demonic thorn, but he suddenly realized that the Taoist name of Goddess Green Melon was embedded in the green demonic thorn. Therefore he changed it in time and changed it to Green Prickles. Shuemei frowned as she looked at the green demonic thorn in her hand. "What is this thing? Why does it look so light like a fake?" Wuqi smiled and did not say a word, while Supremacy 3 Flame's brows twitched as he grabbed the green demonic thorn. He sent his divine will into the green demonic thorn, then frowned and said, "Fellow Taoist Greed, a spirit item of this level has almost become the embryo of an immortal item. TSK, as Shuemei's cultivation base is weak, a treasure of this level." Wuqi waved his hand and interrupted Supremacy 3 Flame. "Why are you being so polite, fellow Taoist? It's just a mere worldly possession, so what's the big deal? Shuemei is smart and cute, and I like her the moment I see her. So, what's the point of giving her a defensive spirit item?" Shuemei was indeed a smart girl. Seeing that Supremacy 3 Flame took the matter so seriously, she hastily jumped off the rock, grinned and gave Wuqi 3 kowtows and said, "Shuemei thanks Senior for the gift. Hehe, is this a spirit item? Senior is so generous. Uncle 3 Flame has never given Shuemei anything good." Wuqi burst out laughing. Supremacy 3 Flame scratched his nose embarrassedly and said with a wry smile, "How am I being stingy? This little girl's cultivation base is weak, and there are too many greedy people in the world. Even if I give her a magical treasure, she will still be worried that others might covet it. How would I dare to give her a good treasure?" Supremacy 3 Flame waved his hand and threw the green melon thorn to Shuemei, then said with a very serious tone, "This is the defensive item fellow Taoist Greed gave you. Remember, do not show it in front of others unless it is absolutely necessary." After scolding Shuemei for a long time, Supremacy 3 Flame fished out a pitch-black flying sword from under his sleeve, which looked like a mediocre magical item at first glance. He gave it to Shui Mei and said, "Use this flying sword to play. Do you understand?" Wuqi kept nodding as he watched. Supremacy 3 Flame was a very cautious man. Shui had yet to recover from the excitement of obtaining a spirit tool when she suddenly saw the bald and ugly flying sword. She immediately pouted her little mouth high. However, it was obvious that Supremacy 3 Flame held a very high position in her heart. Although her heart was filled with reluctance, she still took the flying sword, carefully cut her finger with the sword's edge, and used her blood to draw a sword-controlling rune on the blade. After that, Wuqi pointed at Shui Mei and used her blood to refine all 33 green melon thorns. The green melon thorn transformed into a wisp of green light and soared into the sky, wheeling a few times around Shui Mei before fusing into her hair bun. After that, the green light fused with all 33 strands of hair, and no one could see anything wrong with them from the outside. Hair was blood, and the long hair of a woman was closely related to her bloodline. When the green melon thorn fused with the hair, it could absorb the blood essence in Shui Mei's body through the hair, slowly nourishing and refining it. At the same time, it could also solve the problem of Shui Mei's low cultivation base, and the fact that she had not even opened her spiritual ocean, which prevented her from storing a spirit item in her body. When everything was done, Supremacy 3 Flame cupped his fist and bowed to Wuqi to express his gratitude. Although Supremacy 3 Flame did not say much, Wuqi could tell that he was a straightforward man, and he had acknowledged the friendship between him and Wuqi. Through the green melon thorn, Wuqi's goodwill toward him, as well as Wuqi's intention of befriending Supremacy 3 Flame, had been clearly revealed. After chatting with Supremacy 3 Flame for a while, Wuqi pointed at the 3 flying ships in the valley and said with a smile, "Fellow Taoist, please keep these flying ships and follow me to Anhe City. The smell here is very unpleasant. After all, Shui Mei is still very young, and the scenery here is not very pleasant." Supremacy 3 Flame twitched the corner of his mouth, revealing a bitter smile as he shook his head lightly. The valley was filled with holes caused by his flame thunders, and the ground was strewn with broken corpses. Most of them had been burned to ashes, and only a few bones and rotten flesh were left sticking to the ground. A pungent burnt smell lingered in the air. Some people would believe it if they were told that this place was the hell of Azura. It was indeed not suitable for a little girl like Shui Mei to stay here for too long. What surprised Wuqi was that Shui Mei shook her head disapprovingly. She smiled indifferently and said, "Don't worry, Uncle Greed. It's just a few dead people. Shui Mei is used to it." Wuqi was struck dumb. Used to it. He gave Supremacy 3 Flame a surprised look. Supremacy 3 Flame hastily shook his head, then spun and walked toward the 3 flying ships. Sending a thread of divine will to Wuqi, Supremacy 3 Flame explained in a soft voice. When Shui Mei was young, her clan was struck by a great calamity. All the old and young people in her clan were slaughtered by the local garrison general. I was late, and could only save her from the butcher's blade. Supremacy 3 Flame sighed faintly and said in a deep voice. At that time, she could already remember what happened. She watched helplessly as her parents were beheaded and killed. Wuqi did not say a word, and Supremacy 3 Flame did not say a word either. He came before the 3 flying ships, performed an incantation gesture, and put them into his storage ring. Wuqi laughed and waved his sleeve. A gust of strong wind rolled up Shui Mei and brought her flying back to Anhe City. Supremacy 3 Flame chuckled, stepping on a flaming cloud and following closely behind. Both of them were chatting along the way. Wuqi had the intention of befriending Supremacy 3 Flame, so they exchanged some strange anecdotes, and talked about their experiences in the Tao. There were a few profound scriptures in Wuqi's mind, each of which was a supreme mystic scripture that could lead one to the realm of Gold Immortal, or even Primordial Immortal. He randomly picked a few lines from them and repeated them to Supremacy 3 Flame, making him look like a yes man and treat Wuqi as a celestial being. Both of them traveled at high speed, and before long, they had arrived at Anhe City. Wuqi led Supremacy 3 Flame and Shui Mei into the great hall of the City Lord Mansion, where the celestial fiend Puppet, who had transformed into Wuqi's clone, was sitting with a straight back. When he saw Wuqi enter the hall, he immediately rose to his feet, bowed to Wuqi, and said in a deep voice, "True self, Wuqi answered coolly, then waved his hand at the celestial fiend puppet. Immediately, the puppet transformed into a shadow and fused with Wuqi's body. With a flip of his palm, Wuqi smiled at Supremacy 3 Flame, who was dumbstruck and said, "Fellow Taoist, just now when you mentioned that you are a member of Myriad Immortal Alliance, an emissary from the Ascending Immortal Hall of Myriad Immortal Alliance found my clone. Here is the iron medallion and jade slip he gave me." With a subtle smile on his face, Wuqi handed the iron medallion and jade slip to Supremacy 3 Flame. Supremacy 3 Flame took a deep breath and stared at Wuqi with a look of disbelief. Incarnation? This is a mighty divine ability that only a gold immortal, or at least an upper-grade heaven immortal, can cultivate. Fellow Taoist greets cultivation base. His KTK. Supremacy 3 Flame's attitude towards Wuqi changed once again after a few words of praise. The few incantations Wuqi recited just now had already made Supremacy 3 Flame gasp in admiration. However, he thought that Wuqi had inherited the legacy of a good master. But Wuqi had just revealed the ability of incarnation, and it was not something that could be achieved by inheriting the legacy of a good master. According to Supremacy 3 Flame's knowledge, only someone with the overall strength of a heaven immortal could create an incarnation, and the aura emanating from Wuqi was clearly that of a nascent soul cultivator. Possessing the overall strength of a heaven immortal with just a nascent soul cultivation base, Wuqi's divine ability was truly frightening. All of a sudden, Supremacy 3 Flame had placed Wuqi in a position that was equal to, or even slightly higher than himself. Wuqi gladly sensed the change in Supremacy 3 Flame's words. He nodded and said with a smile, "With that, we are now allies of Myriad Immortal Alliance. I've just joined the alliance, and there are still many things that I need your guidance on." Supremacy 3 Flame kept laughing. He pulled out a golden medallion and showed it to Wuqi, then nodded and said, "That is only natural. I have a few best friends in Myriad Immortal Alliance, and I can introduce them to you." Both men exchanged a smile, having a tacit understanding. Right at that moment, Lao Ai's deep, hoarse voice, which was filled with an eerie evil power, suddenly rang out. "Oh, where did this little girl come from? She is indeed a beauty. How can she be so cute and delicate?" Chapter 471. What Lao Ai said nearly provoked Supremacy 3 Flame into attacking him. Anyone who glanced at him would not think that he was a good citizen. It would have been fine if Lao Ai were to comment on Supremacy 3 Flame directly, but he just had to comment on Shui Mei with a frivolous tone, which offended Supremacy 3 Flame's reverse scale. He nearly released the dragon skin fire sac and burned Lao Ai alive. Supremacy 3 Flame had a cultivation base of 26th tier heaven immortal. His dragon skin fire sac could shoot out 9 types of true flames of pure yang, and 9 types of dark flames of extreme yin. He was also an expert in the art of talisman crafting, and the various fire and thunder talismans he crafted were very popular in Myriad Immortal Alliance. Although he was a 26th tier heaven immortal, he was a violent man. Once he struck, he would not show any mercy, and he had a desperate spirit. Once, with a cultivation base of 26th tier, he had killed a 23rd tier heaven immortal. Therefore, he was a famous figure in Myriad Immortal Alliance. Fortunately, Wuqi stopped Supremacy 3 Flame in time. Otherwise, if Supremacy 3 Flame were to strike, Lao Ai would definitely be turned into ashes. Mo tried every possible way to stop Supremacy 3 Flame. Knowing that his words had brought him trouble, Lao Ai's face darkened as he carefully apologized to Supremacy 3 Flame. Only then did he slip out of the hall in a flustered manner, not daring to stay any longer. Lao Ai was depressed. Why did Wuqi always make friends with people like this? How could a nascent soul cultivator befriend a heaven immortal so easily? It puzzled Lao Ai. Putting aside the gloomy Lao Ai, Wuqi gave the order to prepare a banquet in the parlor in the backyard. Wuqi and Supremacy 3 Flame sat on the main seats, while Shui Mei accompanied them. The host and guests drank to their heart's content, while Supremacy 3 Flame explained to Wuqi in detail what he knew about Myriad Immortal Alliance, allowing Wuqi to learn more about it. The more they talked, the more frightened Wuqi became. Could it be that Supremacy 3 Flame had suddenly come to Anhe City, and attacked the human army led by Miaoihu, because of the bounty offered by Myriad Immortal Alliance? Killing Miaoihu gave him 100 contribution points, killing a human soldier gave him 1 point, and killing an oracle gave him 5 points. After wiping out the army led by Miaoihu, Supremacy 3 Flame had obtained nearly 3,000 contribution points, which were more than enough to exchange for a few bottles of immortal pills, or a lower-grade immortal item in Myriad Immortal Alliance. Supremacy 3 Flame was a hot-tempered man, a ruthless and merciless man who killed without mercy. Because Shuemei's family was wiped out, her father was Supremacy 3 Flame's best friend. Since Supremacy 3 Flame could not deal with the garrison general, who led an army to slaughter Shuemei's entire family, he had been finding trouble with the officials and small armies of Yu Dynasty for the past few years. In the past 3 to 5 years, he had killed nearly 100,000 soldiers of Yu Dynasty. The deaths of 100,000 dead souls had brought him nearly 300,000 contribution points. Coupled with the flying ships and other valuables he had plundered, Supremacy 3 Flame was now very wealthy. His status in Myriad Immortal Alliance had also been upgraded from a silver plate ally to a gold plate ally. Can I get contribution points by killing human soldiers? Wuxia picked up a wine cup and took a sip, then looked at Supremacy 3 Flame curiously and asked, "Can I get contribution points by killing them at will?" Supremacy 3 Flame shook his head and said with a smile, "How can I kill them at will? Isn't that going to cause a great mess?" Fellow Daoists agreed. Please send your divine will into the Iron Medallion, and you will see the few bounty lists of Myriad Immortal Alliance inside. Wuxia nodded and sent his divine will into the Iron Medallion. A strange light flickered before his eyes, and the first thing that appeared before him was a row of large characters. Daoist greed from Euphoria Heavenly Palace of Anhe City. Surprisingly, there was a restrictive spell in the Iron Medallion, indicating the identity and origin of Wuqi's current identity. As his divine will went through the row of characters, a bright light shone in front of him, and a space about 1 acre in circumference suddenly appeared. A few streams of light poured down from the sky, rolling down with purple-gold characters sliding down from them. Wuqi's divine will approach the few streams of light, and immediately, a great amount of information came pouring into his mind. The stream of light closest to Wuqi was a bounty list for killing people. For example, the left judge of punishment court in Diyu province had been offered 10 immortal stones for his life, and the reward would be increased to 15 immortal stones if the person could wipe out his entire family. Behind this reward was a note from the Union of 10,000 Immortals. Given that the existence of this left disciplinary officer has seriously threatened the safety of some allies of the Union of 10,000 Immortals, anyone who can kill this person will be rewarded with 1,000 contribution points. Apart from that, there was another reward, which was a private matter of an ally of Myriad Immortal Alliance. He had offered a reward of 50 immortal stones, asking a mighty immortal in the alliance to help him subdue a huge ancient demon, the Claw Giant Prawn, who had the cultivation base of a 23rd tier heaven immortal, who was hiding in the water margin in Huang province. The person who offered the reward asked for the inner core and soul of this giant prawn, while the rest of the shell, blood, and flesh would belong to the person who offered the reward. There was another bounty list that was particularly interesting. An ally of Myriad Immortal Alliance was cursing on the bounty list. Apparently, this ally was an immortal from the Fiend League. He had secretly released a plague somewhere in Diyu province, killing over 1 million mortals and harvesting their souls to refine his magical treasure. As a result, just as his magical treasure was about to take shape, 3 eminent monks of the Buddhist League passed by and attacked this immortal from the Fiend League, forcing him to flee with one of his arms broken. As for the fiend treasure that was about to take shape, the 3 eminent monks sent it to the afterlife using the Dharma. The request of this ally was to wash the Great Ming Courtyard, where the 3 eminent monks of the Buddhist League resided, with a total reward of 100 immortal stones, as well as various rare and strange materials, and some spirit herbs that could last for over 10,000 years. At the end of the bounty list, he also indicated that he hoped that the Buddhist cultivators of Myriad Immortal Alliance would not tip off the Great Ming Courtyard, so as to fulfill the friendship of his ally. Smiling, Wuqi turned his attention to the other few screens. On one of them, a purple golden character was sliding down at a high speed. It stated that a certain criminal officer of Zhong Province's punishment court had led a group of soldiers and killed several dozens of cultivators around Mount Helan, 2 of whom were the allies of myriad immortals. He hoped that the allies who were closest to Mount Helan would immediately strike and kill this criminal officer along with his soldiers. The reward was also marked with the number of contribution points one could get from killing the criminal officer and his soldiers. Just as Supremacy 3 Flame had said, killing the criminal officer would get 100 points, killing his soldiers would get 1 point, and the oracles who accompanied the army would get 5 points. Following that, another set of purplish gold words fell. This time, the purplish gold words shone with a dazzling light and emitted frightening waves of spirit chi. With a thought, Wuxia was almost forced to direct all of his divine will into the bounty. Supremacy 3 Flame, who was sitting right next to Wuxia, exclaimed as well. Hastily, he took out the golden medallion with the character written on it, and sent his divine will into it as well. Wuxia noticed that there was a purple golden gleam flashing on Supremacy 3 Flame's medallion, and a faint energy fluctuation was rushing out from it. Clearly, this was the method used by the person in charge of Myriad Immortal Alliance to inform all the allies that a mission of great value had appeared. Hastily, he sent his divine will into the golden character that hovered in midair, and a message quickly fused into Wuqi's divine will. It was the reward list issued by the Supreme Council of Elders of the Divine Hall of Myriad Immortal Alliance, asking all the allies to do their best to search for 179 rare immortal herbs and spirit herbs. Behind each immortal grass and spirit medicine was a huge number. It was millions of contribution points, representing a huge amount of wealth and benefits. Among the 179 immortal herbs and spirit herbs, 133 of them were marked with their possible locations, and it was clearly stated that these immortal herbs and spirit herbs could be found in certain places. However, due to the great distance, it was extremely difficult to pick all these immortal herbs and spirit herbs at the same time. Therefore, the reward list asked the cultivators who were closest to those locations to pick these immortal herbs and spirit herbs as soon as possible, and then send them to the nearest merchant of Myriad Immortal Alliance at the fastest speed. As for the other 46 immortal herbs and spirit herbs, their possible locations were not given. The notice only stated the names, aliases, and nicknames of these immortal herbs and spirit herbs, as well as their shapes, odors, characteristics, hobbies, and so on. On the topmost row, there was a row of large characters that were shrouded in purple mist. It was a reward for the spirit liquid condensed from the essence of a high-grade Ganoderma Immortal. A single drop of high-grade Ganoderma Immortal Spirit Liquid could be exchanged for 3 million contribution points, or a high-grade Immortal Artifact. At the end of the line of characters was a special note. Myriad Immortal Alliance guarantees the absolute safety of the person who provides the Ganoderma Immortal Liquid, and the person will be protected by the Supreme Council of Elders of the Divine Hall. An upper-grade immortal item? Wuxia knitted his brows into a tight frown, then shook his head lightly. It was not worth it for him to offer the Ganoderma Immortal Liquid to Myriad Immortal Alliance just for the promise of an upper-grade immortal item. However, among the 179 spirit herbs, 3 of them happened to be in Wuqi's possession. Before leaving Myriad Immortal's planet, Wuxia had looted the secret vault of Great Yan Dynasty, and he had looted countless spirit herbs from it. Coincidentally, there were 3 spirit herbs that had matured for a period of 1 period, and they were on the reward list. According to the price, these 3 spirit herbs could be exchanged for 3 million contribution points. It was a huge sum of money, and it was more than enough for Wuxia to exchange for an upper-grade immortal item. So, why would he take the risk and give away the Ganoderma Immortal Liquid? All of a sudden, Supremacy 3 Flame burst into a loud laughter. He slapped the table and said, "Wonderful! I happen to have a flaming lilac and a half of a purple orchid earth centipede's rhizome. They are the treasures I found by accident when I was looting. Ahaha! I'm going to be rich this time." Rising to his feet cheerfully, Supremacy 3 Flame smiled at Wuxia and said, "Fellow Taoist, it's better to get something like this sooner rather than later. The nearest merchant of Myriad Immortal Alliance to Anhe City is in Xiangli City, which is 3 million miles away. Haha, I'll hurry up and offer these 2 spirit herbs to them. Don't let others take the lead. Upon hearing that, Wuxia rose to his feet hastily and said with a smile, That's great. I do have 2 spirit herbs with me. Supremacy 3 Flame was struck dumb for a long while. Then he clapped his hands and said happily, Wonderful. I did not expect fellow Taoists to be so rich. Let's go now. Or else, if someone takes the lead, the reward will end as soon as the reward is completed. If we are late, there will be no benefits. Wuxia answered hastily. He clapped his hands and called Eugene over, giving him a few instructions. Eugene answered submissively. After that, Wuxia and Supremacy 3 Flame rushed out of the parlor, riding a cloud and heading southwest toward Xianglu City. As for Xuemei, Supremacy 3 Flame left her in the City Lord Mansion, under the protection of Wuqi's 2 clones. The cloud moved at a high speed, and very soon Wuxia and Supremacy 3 Flame had gone far away. Chapter 472. In the gloomy and deep hall of Great Yin Dynasty's Garden of Zhonglu, Yandan and Yin Qijuan were kneeling before Princess Zhonglu. Yandan unleashed his immortal energy and tightly bound Princess Zhonglu. No matter how hard Princess Zhonglu struggled, she could only accept the request of Yandan and Yin Qijuan. Zixian, the rise and fall of Ji clan of Great Yin depends on you. This time, when you follow Wuqi and leave Myriad Immortals' planet, it is the only chance for us. Our life and death, honor and disgrace are all in your hands. Muffled thunderclaps rumbled outside the window. Lightning bolts streaked across the night sky and shone into the hall, illuminating the faces of Yandan and Yin Qijuan. Princess Zhongli's eyes went wide with terror as she stared blankly at her grandfather and father. Her mind was in a great turmoil. The unpredictable innate divine energy in her body went out of control. Princess Zhonglu, who was meditating on the profound mysteries of heaven and earth while facing the morning sun from the east on a reef, suddenly trembled and coughed out a mouthful of blood. Her body swayed and fell onto the reef. Her eyes were tightly shut, and the words Yandan and Yin Qijuan told her when she left Myriad Immortals' planet kept flashing in her mind. Her mind was in a great turmoil. Suddenly, Princess Zhonglu opened her eyes. A 5-colored cloud rose up under her feet, and she stepped on it and flew toward Green Cliff Mountain at the fastest speed. At the back of Green Cliff Mountain, right next to the heart cleansing pool, Princess Zhonglu sat cross-legged with both hands locked into an incantation gesture before her chest. She closed her eyes and entered a deep meditative state. The natural energies within 10,000 miles were attracted by some magical force, swirling and gathering toward Princess Zhonglu. Rain and mist rose from the back of Green Cliff Mountain, and a fine drizzle mixed with rich natural energies was falling from the sky, nourishing the land within 1,000 miles of the back of the mountain. With the nourishment of this rainwater mixed with rich spiritual energy, the back of the Green Cliff Mountain had become an exceptionally fertile spiritual land. Lingji, ginseng, fleeceflower, and other spirit herbs that had just sprouted could be seen everywhere. Some rare herb seeds had also just emerged from the ground. At a glance, the forest was filled with lush green sprouts, and a strange fragrance reverberated in the forest. This was the effect of a person with the primordial divine spirit bloodline on a dignified immortal sect. Many of the spirit herbs were already extinct on the Green Cliff planet, and could not even be found in the Piluo heavenly realm. After Wuqi left for Pengu continent, Patriarch Yuan Hua had gone to great lengths to collect and trade the seeds of some extinct spirit herbs, which he planted in the back of Green Cliff Mountain. Because of Princess Zhonglu, the back mountain of the Green Cliff Mountain had good weather and abundant spiritual qi. There was even a strange vitality hidden in it, and all these elixirs that were extremely difficult to cultivate had all sprouted smoothly. As long as they were carefully taken care of and cultivated with utmost care, Yuan Hua sect would be able to usher in a bountiful harvest in several tens of thousands of years. There were over 47,000 newly planted spirit herb seeds, and over 35,000 of them were extremely rare. It was said that only a small number of them were planted in the mansions of some almighty experts in the world of immortal cultivators. On the other hand, in the back mountain of the Green Cliff Mountain, these spirit herbs, which were extremely rare in all the heavenly realms, were thriving and growing vigorously. Princess Zhongli took a deep breath, forcibly expelling some bad thoughts from her mind. However, when she saw Yan Dan and Yan Qijuan kneeling before her, their faces filled with despair and unwillingness, the words they said made Princess Zhongli's heart twitch, and she nearly lost control of her divine energy once again. I won't think about these things when I'm with him. How long has it been since he left? It's only been a little over 3 years, but why can't he control his inner demons anymore? This shouldn't be the case. I'm protected by the divine flame of order, so it's impossible for any inner demons to harm me. This is not an inner demon but my own obsession. I can't get rid of it with any external force, and I can only break it with my own willpower. But why should I be obsessed with the rise and fall of Great Yan's Ji clan? I, Ji Zixuan, am just a girl. I just want to live a peaceful life with Wuxia. The years of a heaven immortal are endless, and I want to live a peaceful life with him. Why do you have to entrust the life and death of Ji clan to me? You heroic men, you heroes, what are you doing? She gently waved her right hand and thrust it out from a distance. Several dozens of huge trees in front of her disintegrated soundlessly, turning into faint energies that spread in all directions. Princess Zhongli clenched her jaws and said, the life and death of Ji clan should not depend on me. Wuxia, you have no reason to ask me to force Wuxia to risk his life for you. Far off in the distance, Patriarch Yuan Hua was seen sitting cross-legged on a white cloud, his hands placed before his dantian, his eyes closed as he meditated. His aura was completely restrained inside his body, not leaking out at all. Standing next to him was a handsome young man, clad in a white robe, white leather boots, and a white jade crown on his head. He looked like a silver doll himself, his skin as white as snow. Patriarch Yuan Hua's surname was Zi, and this young man was his 19th generation grandson in the mortal world, Zi Yuexin. Zi Yuexin, who was less than 30 years old, was a cultivation genius of Zi clan, and was nurtured and protected by Patriarch Yuan Hua. Despite that, Patriarch Yuan Hua had given him several times of enlightenment, using his own energy essence to change his tendons and cleanse his marrows, and imbuing him with a great amount of enlightenment of the heaven and earth. With that, Zi Yuexin's cultivation base was forcibly pushed to the peak stage of nascent divinity realm. With just one small step, Zi Yuexin would become a heaven immortal. Patriarch Yuan Hua had never told anyone about his relatives, and the people of Zi clan had been living in seclusion on a planet dominated by mortals in Pueyuo heavenly realm. The people of Zi clan had always kept a very low profile, living in seclusion and rarely venturing out. All they did was cultivate, and cultivate. Zi Yuexin was the one whom Patriarch Yuan Hua had painstakingly trained, the candidate who would help him break through the realm of gold immortal. In order to fulfill the promise made by the severely wounded immortal, Patriarch Yuan Hua had put in a lot of effort and meticulously laid out many plans. This girl Zi Xian is an excellent one. Patriarch Yuan Hua opened his eyes and sighed softly. She possesses the bloodline of ancient gods, and she has already formed an innate divine soul. With her around, Yuan Hua sect will prosper, and our clan will gain great benefits as well. Zi Yuexin bent her waist slightly, listening to Patriarch Yuan Hua's words. Shaking his head, Patriarch Yuan Hua said indifferently, "Unfortunately, she is Wuqia's lover." After a long moment of silence, a blush flashed across Patriarch Yuan Hua's face as he said in a low voice, "Wuxia is a man of deep schemes, and his background is unfathomable. Although it was Jiang Yun who brought him to our sect, it really makes me feel uneasy. With just a mere nascent soul cultivation base, he is able to fight against a heaven immortal. Is this something that little Jiang Yun can teach?" Zi Yuexin turned her head and gave Princess Zhonglu a measuring glance. Suddenly, a charming smile appeared on her face as she said, "What do you mean, Patriarch?" Patriarch Yuan Hua breathed out a long sigh, nodded slowly and said, "Zi Xian is a good girl. With her around, Yuan Hua sect will prosper, and so will Zi clan. Just look at the sprouts of spirit herbs all over the mountains, and you can see that with or without her, Yuan Hua sect will be in a completely different situation." Patriarch Yuan Hua closed his eyes once again, shook his head and said, "She has Wuqia in her heart, and that is not good. Wuxia is an unfathomable young man with great ambitions. With such a low cultivation base, I can't believe he has the courage to venture into Pangu continent. If it were any other disciple of Yuan Hua sect, I would never allow him to do so. But since he wants to go, not only did Patriarch allow him to go, I even gave him a few spirit items to boost his courage. Ziyuexin understood. He bowed and said, I'll go get close to Princess Zhonglu now. If I can win her heart. Patriarch Yuan Hua said coolly, make her unable to leave you, which means she will be unable to leave Yuan Hua sect and Z clan. If you can do that, you will be the clan master of Z clan. It is said that Wuxia will return to Green Cliff Planet within 100 years. You have plenty of time to accomplish this. After a brief moment of silence, Ziyuexin smiled and said, wouldn't it be better if Wuxia never returns to Green Cliff Planet? After a long moment of silence, Patriarch Yuan Hua's body slowly disappeared amidst the rosy clouds. His voice was heard coming quietly, Cheer Emol and Emol have gone to Pangu continent. Just half a month after Wuxia departed, Emol and Emol have left for Pangu continent with the excuse that they are in secluded cultivation. Ziyuexin narrowed his eyes and smiled. He praised in a low voice, Patriarch, you have taken every conceivable possibility into consideration. It must be done. She is just a little girl, isn't she a piece of cake? I've tasted too many beautiful girls under the heaven. And now, she has the bloodline of ancient gods? TSK. I guess that will be even more exciting, right? Ziyuexin sneered, then carefully fished out a fist-sized sparrow from under his sleeve. It had a pair of fiery eyes, and its body was covered with green feathers. He casually threw it out. With a few flaps of its wings, the sparrow immediately transformed into a beam of green light and flew towards Princess Zhongli's direction. Ziyuexin produced a strange-shaped longsword, which transformed into an arc of light and wrapped around his body. With a solemn face, he fixed his eyes on the sparrow that was fleeing in front of him and gave chase at top speed. In just a few breaths of time, Ziyuexin had arrived above Heart Cleaning Pool. He cast a restrictive spell with his right hand, freezing the sparrow in midair. Where do you think you are going? I'll find you a good master, okay? Princess Zhonglu opened her eyes abruptly and stared coldly at Ziyuexin, who was hovering in the sky. Ziyuexin gave Princess Zhonglu a glance in astonishment, then quickly stopped the sword beam, cupped his fist and bowed to Princess Zhonglu with a smile on his face. Young lady, please forgive me for disturbing you. It's my sister's birthday in a few days. It's rare for me to see this jade aureole, so I wanted to capture it and give it to my sister. I didn't expect that it would disturb you, young lady. Please forgive me. Upon hearing Ziyuexin's words, Princess Zhonglu, who was already in a bad mood, snorted coldly and rose to her feet. A cloud rose under her feet, and without giving Ziyuexin a glance, she rode the cloud and flew up into the sky. Ziyuexin was taken aback. He had never met a girl with such a character. For a moment, he was a little flustered. Hastily, he rode the sword beam and flew up into the sky, catching up to Princess Zhonglu and asking with a loud voice, Yuexin, please forgive me. Are you a disciple of Yuan Hua sect? Get lost. The unruly temper of Princess Zhonglu, which had not been seen for a long time, suddenly flared up. She pointed her finger out and unleashed her innate divine energy. Several dozens of lightning bolts, each as thick as a water tank, came whistling down from the sky, striking straight onto Ziyuexin, who was caught off guard. A loud cracking noise rang out, and Ziyuexin fell to the ground with a miserable howl, his body covered in black smoke. The innate thunderbolts had broken his bones and torn his tendons, and at least 70% of his muscles were carbonized. Even his defensive spirit item, the Dragon Cloud Centipede, was smashed to pieces. He was nearly killed on the spot. Princess Zhonglu snorted coldly, then stepped on the cloud and flew away. Suddenly, a twisted figure came next to Ziyuexin, who was covered in charred skin. The figure laughed and said in a low voice, Brother Z, you can't do this. Ziyuexin howled in pain, lowered her voice, and began cursing hysterically. Chapter 473. Stepping on a cloud, Wuxia and Supremacy 3 Flame flew at top speed toward Xianglu City. Supremacy 3 Flame was indeed a straightforward man. Along the way, Wuxia heard him talking non-stop, and for some unknown reason, he suddenly brought up the topic of when he first stepped onto the Tao of Immortality, and the reason why he had been cultivating diligently and never dared to bring it along with him. Back in those days, I was extremely lucky. I was planning to capture 2 wild boars in the mountain, butcher them, and sell them in the city. In the end, I found a book called Great Red Flame Dazzling Scripture in the Wild Boar's Cave. I even have a supreme grade fire element energy vein. This book is tailor-made for me. See, in just 1,000 years, I've become an immortal. Haha, since I've just started cultivating, all I want is immortality. Bah. Are you talking about the human emperor's ban? TSK, there are indeed countless mortals who obey the human emperor's ban. Even if an immortal pill is placed right in front of them, and they can become an immortal by consuming it, they will still not consume it. But I'm different from them. Originally, Lord Daozu was from a family of officials. But after he committed a crime, his family fell into decline. As the son of a marquis, I ended up becoming a butcher who slaughters pigs and sells them. How many people have rolled their eyes at me, and how many times have I been bullied? What does the human emperor's ban have to do with me? Tisk, when the Great Red Flame Dazzling Scripture was placed in front of Lao Tzu. No, I mean me, I knew I was going to be rich and immortality was right before my eyes. At that time, why would I care about something like the human emperor's ban? I brought the treasure with me and found an active volcano to cultivate in seclusion. TSK, Lord Daozu is after all a high official of DU, so I do have some common knowledge about cultivation. Cultivating a fire element cultivation technique next to a volcano is definitely the right choice. Immortality. For the sake of immortality, I did not sleep, rest, eat, or drink. I cultivated for 1,000 years and ascended to become an immortal. Haha, after becoming a divine immortal, I thought that I could be arrogant for a while. So I accepted the invitation of the Celestial Court and ascended to the Celestial Court. I thought that I could become an official in the Celestial Court and live a good life from then on. I could sleep with any beautiful fairies that caught my fancy, and the boundless happiness of love and leisure was waiting for me. Hee fellow Taoist greed, take a guess. What can a newly ascended 36th tier heaven immortal like me do in the Celestial Court? Supremacy 3 Flame looked at Wuxia with a mysterious expression. Wuxia shook his head with a smile. How could he know what a 36th tier heaven immortal could do in the Celestial Court? Supremacy 3 Flame's face fell. Coachman, he said through clenched teeth. Using a 36th tier heaven immortal as a coachman. It would be fine if I were to serve those primordial immortals and gold immortals, but my first job was to be a coachman in the mansion of a celestial official of the fire department of the Celestial Court, feeding and washing the horses for the bastard son of his 38th concubine. That little fellow has a Lao Tzu as an celestial official of the Celestial Court, but his cultivation base is only at the Jindan realm. Supremacy 3 Flame patted his chest and said angrily, as a mighty heaven immortal, I was forced to kneel on the ground and serve as a stake for that little fellow to mount his horse. Wuxia was horrified. What happened after that? He asked hastily. With a wry smile on his face, Supremacy 3 Flame shook his head and said, after that, I purposely made a mistake and was punished with 180 dragon skin whips. I was stripped of my immortal status and chased out of the Celestial Court. Since then, I've been living on Panga continent. You can say that I've become a bandit, or that I've given up on myself. Supremacy 3 Flame smacked his lips and said with a cold grin, since then, I've seen through everything. Since I'm a cultivator of immortality, why should I serve as a servant in the Celestial Court? Since then, I've been working hard in my cultivation. Working hard to earn energy stones and immortal stones. Accumulating my wealth. Haha, I can still eat and drink well, and beautiful female cultivators are still lining up to sleep with me. TSK, my luck with women is endless. Wuxia gave him a thumbs up and said smilingly, fellow Taoist, is the reason you cultivate to be an immortal, to eat and drink well, and to do that? Supremacy 3 Flame grinned as he stroked his black beard and said in a low voice, TSK, why do you think I kept that little girl Shuemei in your mansion? TSK, since I saved her 4 years ago, with this stalker following me around, I haven't tasted the taste of meat for 4 years. When I go to Xiangli City this time, I must find a group of beauties and fuck them for 3 days and 3 nights. Pulling his beard, Supremacy 3 flamed through his head back and breathed out a long sigh as he said, "Those mortals only seek glory, splendor, wealth, and a position where they stand above all others. What else can we, the immortal cultivators, seek? Eat well, drink well, sleep well on the bed at night, walk on the street during the day, and be respected and feared by everyone who saw you. You have such a reputation. If we don't have this little pursuit, why do we, the heaven immortals, cultivate all day long?" Wuxia opened his mouth as if he wanted to say something, but he did not say anything for a long while. Supremacy 3 Flame smiled and said, "Why? Have you thought of something?" Fellow Taoist, what is the purpose of your immortal cultivation? Wuxia remained silent for a long while, frowning deeply. At last, he breathed out a faint sigh and said, "What is the purpose of my immortal cultivation? Ugh, I was fucking forced to do it. I've never thought that I would cultivate immortal cultivation. And I've never even thought about something like cultivating immortal cultivation. The place where I come from is different from you, fellow Taoist. You know that there are immortals in this world, and that there are people who don't age or die. Perhaps you've thought about this a lot since you were young." Tilting his head to one side, Wuxia looked at a cloud flying across the sky and said with a blank expression, "But what is the purpose of my immortal cultivation? I've never thought about cultivating immortal cultivation. Since I was young, I've always thought that following Master Xiaobai and the others doing a few beautiful jobs, earning a large sum of money, and then having fun together was the best thing in the world. Even back then, I didn't know what women were." Supremacy 3 Flame looked solemnly at Wuxia and warned, "Then you have to understand that women are the most wonderful things in the world. No matter how angry or resentful you are, you can just find a smooth and tender woman and have a good night with her. Then all your anger will be appeased." Supremacy 3 Flame clicked his tongue and praised, then pointed his finger at the sky and said, "My current goal is to cultivate to the realm of Gold Immortal. Then go to the Celestial Court and have a good night with a few beautiful female immortals that only those Gold Immortals can touch." Wuxia paid no attention to Supremacy 3 Flame's teasing. He frowned and said, "But I came to this place out of nowhere, and started cultivating immortal cultivation out of nowhere. I've never thought that I would be immortal, never thought that I would be immortal, and never thought that I would be able to do something with such a long life. Let's take revenge first." After pondering for a full hour, he smiled and said to Supremacy 3 Flame, "First, I need to avenge my master and those brothers of mine. I want to wipe out that sect, from top to bottom, and exterminate every single member of that sect, from top to bottom. After that..." With a leisurely smile, Wuxia looked at Supremacy 3 Flame and said, "After that, I'll be with the woman I like now, or travel the world, or find a place to live in seclusion." Supremacy 3 Flame shook his head with a strange expression. He gave Wuxia a heavy slap and said with a long sigh, "Brother, you're wrong. Travel the world or live in seclusion with the woman I like. How can there be such a good thing in the world?" Grinning coldly, Supremacy 3 Flame pointed at the path where he came from and said, "Once you step onto the path of immortal cultivation, you can't retreat. You can only move forward. You can only move forward with all your strength. Travel the world or live in seclusion. If you have such a thought, you're dead meat." Grinning coldly, Supremacy 3 Flame said in a ferocious voice, "Shuemei's father, Lao Tzu's best friend in life and death, met a woman whom he said he owed too much in his previous life, and brought her to live in seclusion in her clan. After living in seclusion for 20 years, she gave birth to a girl. Before Lao Tzu could express his gratitude, he heard that they had offended someone, and were surrounded by a great army." Supremacy 3 Flame breathed out a long sigh, then grinned hideously and said, "Their entire clan was executed, and their bodies were torn into 1,000 pieces. All the women were ravaged dozens or hundreds of times before they were killed. Only Shuemei was left, and I was lucky enough to save her." slapping hard on Wuqi's shoulder. Supremacy 3 Flame said in a ferocious voice. The world of immortal cultivators is a damned dog-eat-dog world. Since you're already here, don't ever think you can let this matter rest. Ha! If you don't kill them, they will kill you. If you don't rob them, they will rob you. If you don't ruin their business, they will ruin yours. Every step you take is filled with danger, and every step you take is filled with killing intent. Most of the time, apart from yourself, you can't even trust the woman who is sleeping next to you. The one you fucked until she calls you husband. Pointing at the sky, Supremacy 3 Flame laughed and said, This is the world of immortal cultivators. Fellow Taoists agreed, My brother, this is the world of immortal cultivators. Wuqi's expression flickered slightly as he recalled all the things that had happened after he arrived in this world. Yiyan Lu Suifeng, Wei Xiaoxiao Yu Qianqian Yu Heda and many others including Yu Hehuan Yu Miao, Feng Qingya and Feng Qinggu. Every step he took was filled with danger, and every step he took was filled with killing intent. As he had not run into any danger, unknowingly, Wuqi had relaxed the string in his heart. Smacking his lips, Wuqi frowned and said, Perhaps, things are not as ridiculous as fellow Taoists said? At least, most of the people I've met are good people. Suddenly, Wuqi thought of Patriarch Jiang Yun, the immortals from White Cloud Immortal Sect and Tranquil Vimla Sect, and the numerous immortals from Yuanhua Sect. Apart from Taoist Min and Taoist Mo Luan, who had some conflicts with Wuqi due to some old grudges, generally speaking, all the immortals he had met were good people. Supremacy 3 Flame grinned disapprovingly. As he was about to give Wuqi several tens of thousands of negative examples he had met over the years to teach him a lesson, Wuqi suddenly cried out in surprise. Hastily, he fished out a 1 foot and 2 inches long jade tablet from under his sleeve. The jade tablet was emitting a blinding red gleam, and a deep buzzing noise kept ringing out from it. It was a warning jade talisman crafted using the blood essence of the green centipede and green centipede. Whenever someone from Yuanhua sect was in danger, he just had to activate the jade talisman, and all his fellow sect members within the same heavenly realm would receive the message. At the moment, the red gleam on the jade tablet was extremely strong, and the person in danger was only several millions of miles away from Wuqi. If Wuqi exerted all his strength and used the teleportation technique that only heaven immortals could perform, it would take him about 15 minutes to arrive at the scene. Fellow Taoist 3 Flame, a disciple of my sect is in danger nearby, and I need to go and have a look, said Wuqi anxiously to Supremacy 3 Flame. If fellow Taoist wants to go to Xiangli City, please go now. Before his voice could fade away, Wuqi's body flickered as he broke through the void and teleported forward. With Wuqi's current cultivation base, he had used up 90% of his energy in just one breath to travel a distance of 1 million miles by breaking through the void and teleporting. With the depletion of his energy, Wuqi quickly took out some spirit pills and swallowed them, busying himself in recovering his energy. A red gleam flashed behind him. As Supremacy 3 Flame arrived at the scene, he grabbed Wuqi and teleported forward. Is Lao Tzu the kind of bastard who would leave his companions behind to reap some benefits? Lao Tzu's cultivation base is stronger than yours. Chapter 474. Amidst the lofty mountains was a desert that measured nearly 1,000 miles in circumference. It was surrounded by steep cliffs and precipitous cliffs, which surrounded the vast expanse of yellow sand in the middle. Countless beast bones were piled up in a disorderly manner in the desert. The wind blew the quicksand through the gaps between the bones, causing it to buzz under the sunlight. A gloomy and dangerous aura was lingering under the sand. Taoist Qi was lying on the ground with a gloomy face under the foot of a steep cliff in a corner of the desert. His eyes were staring blankly at the sky, and no one knew what was going through his mind. A 1 foot and 2 inches long jade tablet was stabbed crookedly into the sand next to him. It was emitting a faint red gleam and producing a melodious cry. The bodies of several dozens of huge sand snakes were piled up on the sand before Taoist Qi, as well as countless colorful scorpions that were cut into halves by the sword energies. Some tiny sand ants were seen shuttling back and forth across the sand, laboriously carrying the flesh and blood of the sand snakes and scorpions back to their nests. Daoist Chi's body was soaked with pale golden blood. There was a transparent hole on his right chest, where his Daoist robe was torn to shreds, exposing a large patch of pitch-black muscles. The fangs of the venomous sand snakes must have pierced through his chest, and the deadly poison was invading his body and devouring his life force. Suddenly, a flame flickered in the sky above the desert, as Supremacy 3 Flame rushed out together with Wuxia. If Wuxia were to travel by teleportation, he would not be able to arrive here in less than 15 minutes. However, with Supremacy 3 Flame's help, both of them arrived at their destination with just a single teleportation. It only took them a second to arrive at their destination. Daoist Chi's dull pupils constricted abruptly. He stared at Supremacy 3 Flame, who stood right next to Wuxia, and asked with surprise, "Wuxia, who is this fellow Daoist?" Riding on a sword beam, Wuxia flew and came before Daoist Chi. He knelt down on one knee before Daoist Chi, and pressed his palm on the wound on Daoist Chi's right chest. Silently exercising the hand of web, Wuxia slowly exerted the force in his palm, sucking out the venom from Daoist Chi's wound bit by bit. The venom flowed into Wuxia's palm, and the scalding venom turned Wuxia's palm black. With his body trembling slightly, Wuxia said in a deep voice, "This fellow Daoist is Supremacy 3 Flame, a good friend I've just made today." Supremacy 3 Flame landed on the cloud. He bowed his head and looked at Daoist Chi, then said in a strange voice, You are really lucky to be bitten by a green-patterned sand snake, a puny celestial immortal like you can actually." Before his voice could fade away, Supremacy 3 Flame suddenly let out a furious roar. The dragon skin fire pouch shot out from his waist, unleashing 18 true flames of 9 yin and 9 yang that wrapped him up, transforming into a curtain of fire that protected him in the center. An indescribably terrifying force gushed out from the side, and accurately bombarded the fire curtain. The fire curtain was suddenly shattered, and the dragon skin fire sac was also annihilated. It was annihilation, a complete annihilation that left no trace behind. Supremacy 3 Flame held miserably as he pointed his finger out. A golden spirit talisman shot out from his fingertip as he cried out. The stars spin, and the seas turn into mulberry fields. Life-changing talisman go. As the spirit talisman disintegrated, Supremacy 3 Flame skin suddenly bulged. Amidst a tearing sound that numbed one's ears, Supremacy 3 Flame's bloody body sprung out from his skin, transforming into a beam of dark light, and fleeing at top speed. The golden light emitted from the disintegration of the spirit talisman wrapped up Supremacy 3 Flame's skin. His skin wiggled and wiggled, transforming into a humanoid puppet that looked exactly like Supremacy 3 Flame. The life-changing talisman had the same function as the soul replacement puppet Wuxia used in the past, a miraculous item that could save its master's life at a critical moment. The invisible and traceless destructive force struck the humanoid puppet, and destroyed it without a sound. Supremacy 3 Flame, who had fled hundreds of miles away in a beam of dark light, let out a miserable howl as his body below his neck suddenly turned into a shower of light and drifted away. A beam of dark light wrapped around Supremacy 3 Flame's head, and sent it flying hundreds of feet away, before it ran out of strength and fell heavily to the ground. Obviously, the power of the life-exchanging talisman was not as strong as the invisible and traceless destructive force. When Supremacy 3 Flame's life-exchanging puppet was destroyed, the destructive force followed the aura and hit his body, nearly turning him into nothingness. Supremacy 3 Flame's head rolled a few times on the ground. Abruptly, he opened his eyes and recited a few incantations, preparing to transform into a beam of light and fly away. But all of a sudden, a beam of blood-red light shot over from the side, piercing through his left temple and coming out from his right temple, nailing his head to the ground. The blood-red light was actually a strange spear, several feet long and as thick as a thumb. Its surface was covered with countless bizarre patterns that looked like snake scales, from which blood energy kept bursting out, transforming into numerous blood-red runes that wrapped tightly around Supremacy 3 Flame's head. Supremacy 3 Flame let out a miserable howl of despair. He opened his mouth and roared furiously, with drops of blood spraying out of his torn throat. It was a very miserable scene. Wuxia stared at what had happened in a flash with great shock. While he was still sucking the poison out of the wound on Daoist Qi's chest, Supremacy 3 Flame had been easily beaten to the brink of death. Wu Qi exerted strength on his legs and was about to leap up. "What is going on here?" he snapped. Daoist Qi sighed faintly. All of a sudden, he thrust both palms forward, unleashing 2 immortal talismans that glinted with a white light and hit Wu Qi's chest on both sides. Clouds and thunderbolts burst out abruptly, and Wu Qi howled miserably as his chest was blown to pieces, sending him flying backward in a sorry state. A severe pain kept surging into his mind. The muscles on his chest were blown away, and both rows of his ribs were crushed into bone shards. He was also thrown far away. Wu Qi's bloody chest was exposed in front of everyone. He howled miserably with a great pain, and his mind was completely blank. Together with a few disciples who used the names of rare birds as their names, Daoist men sprung up into the sky from the surrounding sand. In his hand was a small strip of cloth that was slowly turning into ashes. He sighed pleasantly and said, "Luckily, Master had the foresight to give me this talisman first. Otherwise, how long has this kid been in Panga continent? I can't believe he has already hooked up with such a formidable immortal." Without uttering a word, Emolwan and the few Taoists unleashed their sword beams. They did not use the usual technique of controlling the swords with immortal energy. Instead, they directly sent out their immortal souls and placed them on the immortal swords. Controlling the swords with immortal souls and fusing them into one was the most powerful and ultimate technique of controlling the swords for immortals. Unless they were forced into a desperate situation, no immortal would take the risk of fusing their immortal souls with the sword beams. As soon as the swords and souls fused into one, a few sword beams burst out with a dazzling brilliance. After that, the brilliance quickly retracted and transformed into a few foot-long sword beams that looked like they were carved out of crystals, tearing through the void. Before Wu Qi could see the trajectory of the sword beams clearly, he felt a cold sensation on his left shoulder. One of his arms was ripped off by the sword beams, and the sword beams ripped his fallen left shoulder into countless pieces of blood and flesh. With a muffled snort, Wu Qi twisted his body. Immediately, the heavenly outfit of Gale, which he had hidden in his spiritual ocean and nourished with innate energy, transformed into a green wind and shot whistling out. A green Taoist robe appeared on Wu Qi's body. The other few sword beams that shot at the green wind were pushed far away by the wind, and nearly injured the immortal souls attached to the sword beams. Wu Qi was filled with regret. If he knew the heavenly outfit of Gale was so powerful, he would not have hidden this life-saving immortal outfit in his spiritual ocean. Otherwise, he would not have been injured today. The heavenly outfit of Gale was severely damaged, and its item spirit was now in a deep slumber. It had lost the ability to sense danger and protect its owner. Therefore, he should have worn it all the time. He had been too careless. Not only the heavenly outfit of Gale, even the earth element dragon scale shield was severely damaged not long ago. As a result, Wu Qi had hidden it in his spiritual ocean and carefully nourished it, and its item spirit had long fallen into a deep slumber. Otherwise, with the protection of these two extraordinary treasures, even if Wu Qi was injured today, he would not have been injured so badly. Clenching his teeth, Wu Qi staggered a few steps back, then glared at Taoist Qi and growled, "Grand Ancestral Master, what are you doing?" Taoist Qi sprung to his feet, took a step forward slowly and said in a deep voice, "I can't let you return to Green Cliff Planet." A bright idea suddenly flashed in Wu Qi's mind. Suddenly he roared furiously, "Why? If you don't let me return to Green Cliff Planet, you're going to use you to plot against me, a junior? Why is that?" Because. At that very moment, the monstrous analytical ability of Lu Xiaobai and the darkest and heaviest life experience of Wu Wang had played an amazing role. Wu Qi laughed bitterly and said, "Ha for Zhonglu? For the future of Yuanhua sect? For the sake of Yuanhua sect, you want to control Zhonglu? Ha! Don't tell me Patriarch Yuanhua wants to make Zhonglu his granddaughter-in-law?" Taoist Qi did not answer. He tilted his head and looked into the distance. Taoist Min sneered and said, "Cut the crap." Laughing strangely, he said gloatingly, "With Zhang Li's innate talent and divine abilities, it is only natural that she should become one of us." Only then can all the disciples in the sect feel at ease. Taoist Mo Luan said coldly. Our disciple Wuxia was involved in the War of Immortals when he was traveling around Pangu continent. Princess Zhang fell in love with young Master Yuexin, and on a certain day, she married young Master Yuexin. This is a match made in heaven, and the heaven wants Yuan Hua sect to prosper. A chill ran down Wuqi's spine. He gave Taoist Min and Taoist Qi a look, then suddenly transformed into a gust of wind and sped away. After teleporting next to Supremacy Three Flames' head, Wuqi pulled out the spear and threw it into the distance. Grabbing onto the head, which still had a tenacious life force, he quickly transformed into a gust of wind and sped away. The bloodline of Gale was roaring in Wuqi's body, while the heavenly outfit of Gale had also sent a wisp of pure wind element energy into his body. With that, he transformed into a gust of wild wind and sped away with many afterimages behind him. Together with a few immortals from Yuan Hua sect, Taoist Qi and Taoist Min, broke through the void and sped towards Wuqi. After all, Wuqi's cultivation base was not as strong as Taoist Qi and Taoist Min, the two senior heaven immortals of Yuan Hua sect. Not long after he fled, the few immortals had teleported next to him, unleashing various immortal spells and restrictive spells at the same time. A muffled snort rang out as the heavenly outfit of Gale emitted a dazzling green light that wrapped around Wuqi, shielding him as he fled into the distance in a sorry state. All sorts of immortal thunderbolts, sword beams, and magical treasures smashed onto Wuqi's body like raindrops, but they could only cause the green light transformed from the heavenly outfit of Gale to spin, and could not hurt Wuqi's body at all. Taoist Min stamped his feet anxiously as he cried out furiously, "Senior brother, what are you waiting for? This fellow is protected by such an immortal item. When are you going to use the spirit talisman given by Master?" Taoist Qi breathed out a long sigh as an inconspicuous little strip of cloth appeared in his hand. With a light flick of his wrist, the strip of cloth suddenly turned into a wisp of ash. An invisible and traceless force came and smashed brutally onto Wuqi's body. Chapter 475. Suddenly, the item spirit of the heavenly outfit of Gale woke up from its deep sleep. In a panic, it sent a clear and urgent message to Wuqi. Primordial gold talisman. It's a primordial gold talisman. Be careful. An invisible and traceless force smashed onto Wuqi's body. A dazzling green light burst out from the heavenly outfit of Gale. The item spirit let out a shrill cry, as a green shadow of a Gale emerged from Wuqi's body and spun rapidly around Wuqi. The little bit of energy that the item spirit had accumulated after countless years of slumber was unleashed in an instant. 13 green talismans the size of a human head emerged around Wuqi's body, each glinting with a green light and emanating a suffocating energy fluctuation. In just a blink of an eye, all 13 talismans were shattered, and the true form of the heavenly outfit of Gale collapsed with a boom. Only a thread of its true spirit managed to escape back into Wuqi's body, together with the core of the heavenly outfit of Gale, which was composed of all the restrictive spells and formations. Before the primordial immortal item left behind by Supremacy Gale could recover its original form, it was destroyed by a primordial gold talisman that came from a primordial immortal. By sacrificing itself, the heavenly outfit of Gale had barely offset 40% of the power of the primordial gold talisman. The dreadful force, which was invisible and traceless, yet capable of destroying everything, continued to approach him. Wuqi cried out in panic. Suddenly, the earth element dragon scale shield issued a sharp cry, as 36,000 golden dragon scales shot out whistling through the air, wheeling around him and transforming into a dragon-shaped shadow that glinted brilliantly like a real dragon. Right after the golden dragon took its final form, the power of the primordial gold talisman smashed down with a deafening rumble, shattering the dragon scales and shattering them. The earth element dragon scale shield gave a sad cry and exploded, leaving behind a clump of innate earth element energy essence that fled into Wuqi's body and was absorbed by his earth meridians. Wuqi's body absorbed the earth spirit vein, and a large amount of yellow gas gushed out from his body. His body's strength instantly increased by several times. Panic-stricken, Wuqi sensed that the dreadful energy, which was strong enough to turn him into dust, was approaching him. He screamed and shot out the spirit-restricting rope and the flaming magpie sword at the same time. The spirit-restricting rope transformed into rings of purple light and wound around his body. With a flash of purple light, the spirit-restricting rope vanished into nothingness. As soon as the flaming magpie sword shot out of his body, it was instantly annihilated before it could even display its might. In a great panic, Wuqi unleashed all his magical items, magical treasures and spirit items. However, before the mighty power of the primordial gold talisman, they were like a few ants trying to stop an army of 1 million soldiers. All the magical treasures unleashed by Wuqi were shattered by the despairing power of the primordial gold talisman. For a moment, a colorful firework seemed to explode around Wuqi. One magic artifact after another was unleashed and one magic treasure after another was destroyed. The destructive power unleashed by the primordial gold talisman was still approaching Wuqi, and it looked like it was about to hit Wuqi's body. Forced into a desperate situation, Wuqi let out a bitter laugh and unleashed both the sword of Greedy Wolf and the cold electric mirror, which he was most familiar with. Loyally, the sword of Greedy Wolf transformed into several dozens of black wolf heads and thrust into the void. However, when the tremendous force came pressing down, the sword was instantly turned into nothingness. On the other side, the cold electric mirror gave a sad cry. Suddenly, it sprung up into the sky, ignoring Wuqi and trying to flee based on its instinct. However, the frightening power of the primordial gold talisman had sealed off the surrounding void. When the cold electric mirror flew less than 10 feet away, it suddenly flashed and turned into a clump of tiny thunderbolts that sprinkled down. All the magical treasures around Wuqi were shattered. Apart from the dark hassock, which he could not use, Wuqi's last hope was the chariot of 8 horses. With a thought in his mind, Wuqi sent his divine will into the chariot, trying to use its power to help him escape from this calamity. However, as he was in a hurry, he did not have the time to disguise his divine will as the aura of a human emperor. The chariot of 8 horses paid no heed to Wuqi's attempt. Instead, it unleashed a tremendous counterforce, which turned the invading divine will of Wuqi into nothingness. Abruptly, a rainbow gleam flickered on Wuqi's right arm. The chariot of 8 horses could sense a force that was powerful enough to destroy it pressing down from above. Abruptly, a beam of rainbow light shot up into the sky. The 8 horses of the chariot neighed in panic, pulling the chariot as they sped up into the sky and sped away at top speed. The primordial gold talisman swept across the chariot of 8 horses. Instantly, the chariot dimmed, and the colorful chariot turned into a rusty, broken object that looked like it was forged from bronze. Then it transformed into a faint beam and sped away into the distance. Wuqi could clearly sense that 99% of the enormous willpower stored in the chariot had disappeared. Such a tremendous amount of willpower was shattered by the primordial gold talisman, with just a single strike. Wuqi roared furiously and unwillingly. Apart from the celestial fiend puppets that could never withstand the frightening power of the primordial gold talisman, and the dark hassock that would never listen to his command, he did not have anything else with him. A despairing roar came out from Wuqi's mouth. Risking everything, he released 10,000 longbow men from the spirit-breeding ring. Haha! Amidst the loud roars, these longbow men rushed out from the ring, immediately forming into a huge battle formation of 10,000 men. 10,000 longbow men, who were on the verge of breaking through the realm of nascent soul, had the overall strength to fight against a nascent divinity cultivator. The enormous energies of 10,000 longbow men merged into one, transforming into a nearly corporeal killing intent that towered into the sky. Right when the killing intent rose, it was immediately shattered by an invisible force. The enormous force unleashed by the primordial gold talisman shattered everything. Those longbow men howled and howled miserably as their bodies disappeared inch by inch, turning into nothingness. They could clearly see their own bodies disintegrating without any pain. Every inch of their bodies disappearing was taking away a part of their souls. When their bodies completely disintegrated, Their souls turned into nothingness as well. Faced with the remaining power of a primordial gold talisman, these longbowmen whom Wuxia had spent a great deal of effort to cultivate with countless medicinal herbs were so vulnerable. He held miserably, and with the last glimmer of hope, he produced the Darkwater Heavenly Palace. This palace belonged to Lady Dark Goldwater, and was covered with countless restrictive formations. Wuxia only hoped that this palace could help him offset a part of the fatal power of the primordial gold talisman. Even if it could only offset a little bit of the power, it would be his chance. Just like everything Wuxia had thrown out before, the Darkwater Heavenly Palace flickered soundlessly and vanished into nothingness. Daoist Min's laughter was heard coming from afar. Why is this kid still struggling? But where did this kid get so many good things? Daoist Min's words were filled with mockery, as well as the jealousy that was carved deep into his bones, a naked jealousy. Why was he still struggling? Why was he still struggling? Why was he still struggling? Wuqi's eyes widened abruptly. He turned around and snapped at Daoist Min. Why am I still struggling? I'm not going to die, and I'll definitely seek revenge from you. An unprecedented resentment rushed straight into Wuqi's heart. His heartbeat sped up abruptly, and he kept howling and howling. Suddenly, the corner of his eyes cracked, and a large amount of blood burst out from them. Daoist Qi clenched his jaws tightly and turned his head away, refusing to look at Wuqi's ferocious face that looked like an evil ghost. Wuqi let out a strange laugh. Suddenly, a desperate technique from Scroll of Stealing that could kill the enemy together with him suddenly appeared. While laughing fiercely, 5 acquired spirit pearls flew out from his body, followed by a few other fake nascent souls, including the Dark Een nascent soul and the Inferno Fiend nascent soul. A great amount of energy stones and immortal stones flew out from the Black Dragon's spirit ring at the same time. Wuqi kept coughing out mouthfuls of blood, which condensed into several hundred bizarre primordial runes in the air. Each of these runes was sharp and angular, and filled with a threatening murderous aura and a bitter resentment. Not only the energy stones and immortal stones, but also all other objects that contained a certain amount of natural energies, from ordinary ores to rare ores, from rare spirit herbs to ordinary herbs that could be found everywhere on the street. Apart from the fragrance Ganoderma found in the path outside the Darkwater Heavenly Palace, everything in the Black Dragon spirit ring was released. The 5 acquired spirit pearls were drifting in the air according to the positions of 5 elements. The primordial runes transformed from Wuqi's blood fused with the pearls, and a 5-colored glow enveloped Wuqi's body. It was as if the void was sealed by the strong 5-colored glow, which kept swallowing and spitting, sucking in all the immortal stones, energy stones, and various spirit herbs that flew out from the Black Dragon spirit ring. An enormous amount of natural energies were forcibly extracted from these objects, turning into energies of 5 elements and fusing with the 5 acquired spirit pearls. A dangerous aura spread in all directions. Daoist Min and Daoist Qi stared at Wuqi in horror. Daoist Min cried out sternly, "Those are acquired spirit pearls of 5 elements. What are you trying to do? Bastard, where did you get so many immortal stones? Where did you get so many energy stones? Where did you get so many spirit herbs? You damn bastard. You, what are you trying to do? Stop it. Stop it." Wuqi struck his own chest with his palm, forcing out 5 drops of his blood essence, which was the most important to him. They transformed into 5 fist-sized runes and fused with the spirit pearls of 5 elements. Right at the moment when the 5 runes fused with the spirit pearls, all the immortal stones, energy stones, and spirit herbs in the Black Dragon spirit ring were restored to the most basic energies of 5 elements. Disintegration of 5 elements, Great Destruction Chaos Unity Spell. Wuqi spat out a phrase that made one shudder. He laughed in a strange voice and said, "You have forced me to do this. Ha ha ha, you have forced me to do this." Inside his 7 stealing heaven meridians, Wuqi's 10 innate nascent souls shrunk abruptly, from the height of 1 foot to the size of a fist. A vast amount of innate energy essence rushed whistling out from the meridians in Wuqi's arms, transforming into a 5-colored ray, and injecting into the 5 spirit pearls. Like a detonator on a dynamite, The innate energy essence detonated the 5 spirit pearls in a flash. Using the innate energy essence as the trigger, the innate energy detonated the primordial runes, forcibly reversing the acquired energy to the innate. It was like a chain reaction of a nuclear bomb, unleashing a frightening power that could make a gold immortal's face turn pale. A loud boom rang out, as a ring of invisible and colorless shockwave rushed several tens of thousands of miles away. All the mountains along the way were flattened, and all the living beings were turned into nothingness. Dozens of cities with over 1 million people, as well as numerous villages and towns, were silently annihilated by the explosion. The sky was filled with ghosts who had been wronged. The power of the primordial gold talisman clashed head-on with the destructive chaotic unity spell Wuxia unleashed with the help of the 5 spirit pearls of 5 elements and countless materials. In the center of the explosion, the two forces formed a miraculous balance. Holding Supremacy 3 Flames' head in his arms, Wuxia was lucky enough to survive amidst the subtle peace in the center of the explosion. On the other hand, Taoist Qi, Taoist Min, and all the immortals they brought here had turned into nothingness, just like all the magical treasures and spirit items Wuxia had. The heaven and earth and the void had turned into a chaotic mess. The innate and acquired energies had mixed together, rolling and rolling like a pot of porridge. Coughing violently, Wuxia transformed himself into a gust of wind, and escaped from the explosion with great difficulty, carrying Supremacy 3 Flame in his arms. In the distant green cliff planet, a few soul jade slips placed on the incense tables suddenly exploded. A few disciples who were in charge of taking care of these soul jade slips screamed, and rushed out of the hall. A few moments later, Patriarch Yuan Hua's furious roar shook the entire green cliff planet. Chapter 476. Relying on the last wisp of innate energy left in his body, Wuxia carried Supremacy 3 Flames' head with one arm, and carefully avoided the boiling chaotic airflow, choosing a random direction and fleeing in a panic. After flying aimlessly for a few days and nights, Wuxia could not hold on any longer, and finally fell to the ground in a gray valley. Suddenly, Supremacy 3 Flames' head fell heavily to the ground and rolled for a long distance. Supremacy 3 Flame cried out in pain. With great effort, he managed to keep his head upright on the ground by moving his facial muscles. Lying on the ground, Wuxia stared at Supremacy 3 Flame, panting heavily. After a long while he smiled bitterly and said, "I'm sorry for dragging you down, fellow Taoist." Supremacy 3 Flame breathed out a deep sigh and said, "Cut the crap. It is not the first time that Lao Tzu had his arms and legs broken." He spat out a mouthful of sand and murmured under his breath, "Lao Tzu has lived for so many years, but he has only had a few friends who have gone through life and death together. Only when he was about to be beaten to death did he manage to make a true brother. In that situation just now, you managed to bring me out. From now on, you are my brother." With great difficulty, Wuxia moved his body, then slowly sat cross-legged on the ground. He raised his head and stared at the bright moon in the sky, not saying a word for a long while. His heart was lifeless, like a graveyard that had not been visited by any living person for many years, with only dead ghosts dancing in the middle of the night. Sitting cross-legged on the ground and staring at the bright moon, Wuxia operated all his brain cells, trying to figure out why this had happened. What exactly happened? Why would such a thing happen? If it were Taoist Min and his disciples who had followed him to Panga continent to hunt him down, he could still accept it. But why did Taoist Qi join them? It was a primordial gold talisman, which Patriarch Yuan Hua had once used to kill formidable enemies. Wuxia had witnessed its power with his own eyes. Why did it appear in Taoist Min and Taoist Qi's hands? Why would they use it to kill him? Was it really for Princess Zhanglo? For her? So, hey, what are you thinking about? Supremacy 3 Flame said lazily, "Brother, please think of a way to heal me first. I only have a head left, and my immortal soul is dispersing. In a few days, Lao Tzu's cultivation base will drop by at least 1 tier. TSK, Lao Tzu has countless enemies, and Lao Tzu has also offended a lot of people in the union of 10,000 immortals. If his cultivation base drops by 1 level, wouldn't he be killed?" Wuxia turned to look at Supremacy 3 Flame and said in a deep voice, "My great ancestral master is among them. Supremacy 3 Flame laughed mockingly and said, "What is Grand Ancestral Master?" Lao Tzu has seen with his own eyes that in order to cultivate the art of passionless devil, he killed his own children and grandchildren, and took their primordial yin and primordial yang to be sacrificed to the devil god. Supremacy 3 Flame sighed and said with a cold grin, "Brother, do you understand now? This is the real world of cultivators. Travel the world with the woman you love? Live in seclusion? Ha! Since that woman of yours is being chased by so many people, she is either extremely beautiful, or she has some kind of primordialine energy that is very useful to others, or she has some special bloodline that someone has taken a fancy to." Supremacy 3 Flame took a deep breath instinctively and said assertively, "With your current overall strength, not to mention those people behind your great ancestral master, anyone with power and influence who sees your woman will never let her go, let alone those people behind your great ancestral master." He breathed out a long sigh and said with mixed emotions, "Therefore, whenever Lao Tzu wants to do that, he will find a group of girls and have sex with them for a few days and nights. But Lao Tzu will never fall in love with a woman, and he will never let himself fall in love with a woman, unless Lao Tzu has the cultivation base of a primordial immortal, or at least become a chief official of the celestial court. Only then will he have the courage to find a good woman, get married and have children. Otherwise, Power and strength," Wuxia said coolly. Supremacy 3 Flame hastily added, "And a backer. No matter how strong your cultivation base is, without a backer and a group of reliable people around you, you will not be able to achieve anything." Lao Tzu had heard of quite a few famous itinerant cultivators who had the cultivation base of a primordial immortal, but in the end, all of them had fallen. "You must have a backer, my brother." Supremacy 3 Flame licked his lips and said solemnly, "You must have the power and you must be at least a chief official of the celestial court. You must have the strength, and you must have the cultivation base of a primordial immortal. Even if you are the weakest 9th-tier primordial immortal, no one would dare to provoke you. Finally, you must have a backer. Even a primordial immortal needs a backer. For example, if you have a backer from the celestial court, no one will dare to provoke a primordial immortal under the celestial court." Wuxia looked down at Supremacy 3 Flame's head and asked, "Apart from the celestial court, are there any other powers I can rely on?" Supremacy 3 Flame pondered for a moment, then blinked his eyes and said with a sigh, "Apart from the celestial court, of course, there are other good powers to rely on. But Lao Tzu is too lazy to go to them, for he would be bullied by others. Also, Lao Tzu is not used to pretending to be a grandson, so, hee. After that, Supremacy 3 Flame began to speak with some gestures. Apart from the great celestial emperor Ziwei Lingying of the celestial court, who was nominally in control of the celestial court, there were many other figures in all the heavenly realms and Pangu continent, who no one dared to provoke. Apart from the great celestial emperor Ziwei Lingying of the celestial court, there were also 5 celestial emperors of 5 directions, who were the deputies of the great celestial emperors. They were formidable figures who few people dared to provoke. Apart from the 6 figures who held the title of celestial emperors in the celestial court, there were also some famous figures on Pangu continent, and all the heavenly realms. First, the Eastern Green Emperor. He was a formidable figure who had existed since the ancient times, and represented the ancient gods of the ancient god clan, including wind, rain, thunder, and lightning. Second, the Northern Black Emperor. He had also existed since the creation of heaven and earth, and represented the ancient gods of the ancient god clan, who possessed the ominous powers of plagues, calamities, and so on. Third, the Western White Emperor. Like the previous 2, this White Emperor had the same seniority, and he represented the interests of the ancient god clan, including the mountain elves. Fourth, the Central Yellow Emperor. The Yellow Emperor Xianyuan, the ancestor of the human race, became an almighty expert with the supreme virtues of the human race. He represented the interests of the entire human race, and was the spiritual leader of the human race on Pangu continent. Under his command were the divine dragons, the phoenix, the Qilin, and even the azure dragon, the white tiger, the vermilion bird, and the black tortoise. Some of the demon immortals and ghost deities were also willing to submit to the Yellow Emperor. Fifth, the Southern Yin Emperor. Shenong, the Yin Emperor, was one of the ancestors of the human race. Just like the Yellow Emperor Xianyuan, he had attained an immortal and indestructible body by virtue of virtues. Under Yin Emperor's command were all kinds of powerful ancient races, such as the Longbow Kingdom people and other strange races, all kinds of ghosts, demon spirits, barbarians, wild beasts, fierce birds, and even the ancient evil gods Gong Gong, Zhurong, and Xiang Lu. All of them were under Yin Emperor's command. Apart from these world-shaking figures, the demon realm had 7 demon emperors and 108 demon saints. The fiend realm had 9 fiend emperors and 72 fiend kings. And the ghost realm had 13 great heavenly ghost kings and 800 ghost saints. Compared to the 6 celestial emperors and 5 emperors of the celestial court, these people were slightly weaker, but they were still overlords with strong overall strength. Apart from these powerful figures, there were also some other supreme existences in all the heavenly realms, and even on Pangu continent. According to the legends, in the dark abyss of the Northern Ocean, there was an extraordinary figure who had established a sect and recruited many disciples. Even the officials of Yu Dynasty were too lazy to provoke this figure, and allowed him to occupy a large area of the land. Supremacy 3 Flame once had a drink with an ally of Myriad Immortal Alliance. The ally, who possessed the overall strength of a gold immortal, told Supremacy 3 Flame about it while laughing. Supremacy 3 Flame took it as an anecdote and asked about it. Suddenly, 2 blood-red specks of light lit up in Wu Qi's grayish pupils as he chuckled and said, "Oh, the dark abyss of the Northern Ocean? Do you know the map of that place, fellow Taoist?" Supremacy 3 Flame answered reflexively, "Of course, Lao Tzu would want to know about such an anecdote. The dark abyss of the Northern Ocean is a dangerous place that few people go to." However, Lao Tzu did ask that ally for the map. Wu Qi chuckled, but there was no warmth in his laughter. Looking up at the bright moon, Wu Qi suddenly sprung to his feet. Cupping his fist and bowing to Supremacy 3 Flame, Wu Qi said in a deep voice, "I've troubled you this time, fellow Taoist. I hope fellow Taoist will accept these meager gifts." A plume of green smoke rose from the top of his head, as the last item Wu Qi had on him, the dark yin energy vase, which could only produce various true water, flew out. Carefully, a beam of light shot out, and 9 drops of Ganoderma liquid flew out, emitting a strong fragrance. Wu Qi pointed his finger out, and the liquid flew into Supremacy 3 Flame's mouth, transforming into an enormous amount of energy in just a blink of an eye. Supremacy 3 Flame's head began to tremble violently, and his fair skin began to grow rapidly. His head flew up into the air, while a large amount of energy rushed out from his short neck, outlining the outline of his body. Sizzling noises rang out, and before long, Supremacy 3 Flame's body had fully recovered under the powerful effect of the Ganoderma liquid. On top of that, the powerful energy contained in the Ganoderma liquid had not been completely depleted, and had even improved his dermic power by a large margin. After bowing deeply to Supremacy 3 Flame, Wu Qi said in a deep voice, "Fellow Taoist, please show me the way to the dark abyss of the Northern Ocean." With a point of his finger, another 9 drops of Ganoderma liquid wrapped in xianbing flew into Supremacy 3 Flame's palm. Supremacy 3 Flame stared blankly at the drops of Ganoderma liquid that were rolling and spinning in his palm. "It is Wu Qi who has dragged you into this calamity, fellow Taoist," said Wu Qi. "Please exchange the 9 Ganoderma liquid for some rewards in Myriad Immortal Alliance. I believe it should be enough to make up for your loss. As for the rest, please keep all the secrets for Wu Qi. What do you think?" Supremacy 3 Flame clasped his palm tightly around the 9 drops of Ganoderma liquid, stared at Wu Qi and said with a smile, "Aren't you afraid that Lao Tzu will rob your treasure? Ha ha ha. This is the Ganoderma liquid left behind by a Ganoderma immortal." Wu Qi smiled faintly, shook his head and said, "Would you do that?" Supremacy 3 Flame was taken aback. Shaking his head, he said with a loud laugh, "Hee hee, I never thought that Lao Tzu would meet a man as honorable as Lao Tzu. Wonderful. From now on, you will be Lao Tzu's real brother." Then he pointed his finger at the ground, causing countless marks to emerge out of thin air. While pointing, he showed Wuqi the way to the dark abyss of the northern ocean from Zhong province. Supremacy 3 Flame did not ask what Wuqi was going to do, but just pointed out the way in great detail to Wuqi. After memorizing the way, Wuqi bowed deeply at Supremacy 3 Flame, then spun and left. Supremacy 3 Flame quickly caught up with him and cried out, "Brother, you should heal your wounds first. Where are you going?" Without looking back, Wuqi rode a cloud and flew into the distance. "Supremacy 3 Flame, let's meet again if fate allows," he cried out. After a long while, Wuqi said coldly, "I just want to let some people know that there are some things that they should not do." With a blink of his body, Wuqi had already turned into a gust of wind and flew into the distance. He did not turn his head again. Supremacy 3 Flame was stunned for a moment, then suddenly shook his head and sighed. "Brother, I hope you have a safe journey. Kill, but don't let others kill you. Rob, but don't let others rob you." Chapter 477. On Green Cliff Mountain. In the grand hall where all the soul jade slips of Yuan Hua sect's disciples were stored. The spacious hall was dimly lit, with only 2 eternal lamps hanging from the ceiling with 2 thin golden ropes emitting a faint light. A mountain breeze blew into the hall from outside, swaying the flame and blinking the shadows, as if there were countless ghosts wandering about in the hall. Inside the hall, numerous shelves carved out of green mountain rocks were placed neatly on top of them. Underneath each soul jade slip was a small wooden plaque, on which was written the name of the owner, as well as their position and seniority in Yuan Hua sect were written in small gold-plated characters. At the highest point of the innermost shelf was a palm-sized, pale golden soul jade slip, with a wooden plaque underneath it written with the name of Patriarch Yuan Hua. Originally, there were a few cells under Patriarch Yuan Hua's soul jade slip, but now, only 2 of them had a pile of broken soul jade slips, while the rest were empty. Only the wooden plaques hanging under the cells had pale golden characters written on them. Patriarch Yuan Hua stood in the shadow, his body shivering as he stared at the 2 broken soul jade slips. His eyes were filled with tears, and 2 lines of blood ran from the corners of his eyes all the way to his chin. Blood and tears kept flowing down his cheeks. The few empty cells were the soul jade slips of a few of Patriarch Yuan Hua's former direct disciples. Yuan Hua sect had gone through several dozens of periods, and the few direct disciples whom Patriarch Yuan Hua regarded as his own children, whom he loved even more than his own sons, had fallen in the battles with other immortal sects, as well as the battles with other itinerant cultivators. Every time one of his disciples died, Patriarch Yuan Hua would feel a sharp pain in his heart, as if a knife was twisting with it. In the end, only Daoist Qi, who was honest and steady, and Daoist Min, who was smart and capable, but a little narrow-minded. After spending several dozens of periods together, Daoist Qi and Daoist Min had become the bones in Patriarch Yuan Hua's marrow, the flesh in his heart. As Patriarch Yuan Hua's cultivation of cultivating his qi and mind had become better and better, he had buried this little bit of romantic feelings in the depths of his heart. Over the years, the relationship between master and disciple seemed to have faded. But when he suddenly saw the 2 soul jade slips, which were broken into pieces, he suddenly realized that his heart was broken as well. The last 2 direct disciples were gone. The personal disciple whom he had painstakingly trained for dozens of periods, who had spent more time with him than his own son, was gone. They were adopted by Patriarch Yuan Hua, who was only a nascent divinity cultivator at that time. They were brought up in a miserable state, and when Patriarch Yuan Hua built Yuan Hua sect, the last 2 personal disciples who gradually built the sect, they were gone. The shattering of the soul slip was a sign that the soul would scatter and vanish into nothingness. Daoist Qi and Daoist Min, the last 2 disciples of Patriarch Yuan Hua, were gone. Do you know that I've successfully refined that upper-grade immortal sword? It is a 7th-grade immortal sword, and it is more than enough to make my name resound throughout Puluo heavenly realm. No one will dare to offend Yuan Hua sect anymore. Yuan Hua sect is about to. No, it is already the strongest immortal sect in Puluo heavenly realm. In the future, we will leave Puyo Heavenly Realm and spread Yuan Hua Sect's prestige to the other heavenly realms. Do you know that the opportunity for Yuan Hua Sect to prosper is right before our eyes? With Zhang Li's bloodline of ancient gods, Green Cliff Planet will definitely become one of the few blessed lands with immortal veins among all the heavenly realms. The current Green Cliff Planet cannot even support the cultivation needs of a mid-grade heaven immortal. In the future, as long as all the energy veins on Green Cliff Planet are condensed and refined into immortal veins by the ancient divine power, one Green Cliff Planet will be able to provide all the immortal energy needed for the cultivation of 10 gold immortals. As long as either I, or any one of you, become a gold immortal, I'll be able to bring you under the tutelage of that senior. Do you know that senior is a primordial immortal? He is a primordial immortal. If we can become the disciples of a primordial immortal, perhaps. No, we will definitely become the overlord of Yu Hua Heavenly Realm in the future. Those heaven monarchs and immortal monarchs of the celestial court will not even have the qualification to stand tall before us in the future. A bright future is right before our eyes. How could you die like this? Patriarch Yuan Hua clenched his fists tightly and suddenly roared at the top of his voice. Who gave you the courage to die like this? Without my permission. How dare you have your souls destroyed? How could he dare to die so cleanly like this? Not even a wisp of your broken soul was left behind. And I didn't even have the chance to search for your reincarnations. You unfilial disciples. The air in the great hall suddenly became thick and heavy. Numerous invisible gusts of wind were twisting and turning in the hall like great pythons, producing strange howling noises. The great hall was shaking, and all the soul jade slips were trembling. A faint blood mist was seeping out of Patriarch Yuan Hua's body, and a blood-red gleam that should never appear in his eyes was bursting out of his eyes. Patriarch Yuan Hua's meditation technique, which he had cultivated for dozens of periods, had suddenly disintegrated. With the outbreak of the 3 separations and the birth of the 5 evils, the boundless resentment immediately attracted those heavenly demons who were hiding in the outer realms of the chaotic dimension. They were invisible and intangible, but possessed mighty divine abilities. Quietly, a wisp of fiend will fused with Patriarch Yuan Hua's immortal soul. The blood-red gleam shrouding him grew stronger, and both his eyes, including the whites of his eyes, turned a frightening red. He clenched his fists tightly, and crackling noises could be heard coming from all the joints in his body. The 7th-grade immortal sword flew out with a threatening heat wave, and was caught in Patriarch Yuan Hua's hand. An enormous amount of immortal energy was surging in his body. As the sword sensed the killing intent in Patriarch Yuan Hua's heart, it could not help but let out a bloodthirsty cry. Suddenly, the sound of footsteps was heard coming from outside the great hall. Patriarch Yuan Hua flipped his palm, and the immortal sword turned into a stream of flame and plunged into his forehead. The blood-red gleam shrouding him quickly retracted, and Patriarch Yuan Hua's eyes regained their clarity. With hands clasped behind his back, he asked coolly, "Green Staff and Green Melon are here? Just in time." Immortal Green Staff and Goddess Green Melon brought Patriarch Jiang Yin into the great hall. They walked quickly to the last shelf, and when they saw the 2 broken soul jade slips, Chi-Chi's body trembled. Immortal Green Staff dropped to his knees and howled. "Master! How could this happen? Grandmaster, wasn't Master in a secluded cultivation? How did this happen?" Patriarch Jiang Yin was so frightened that he dropped to his knees as well. He stared blankly at the 2 broken soul jade slips, which represented the souls of Taoist Qi and Taoist Min. His eyes were blank, and no one knew what was going through his mind. Laughing strangely, Patriarch Yuan Hua walked slowly before Patriarch Jiang Yin, reached out his hand, and placed it on his shoulder. "Jiang Yin, what is the background of that disciple of yours, Wuxia? Come tell us in detail. Where did Wuxia come from? Is he cultivating the energy unity technique that you taught him? Hee, don't tell me that Wuxia is able to fight against immortals with his cultivation base of nascent soul realm, just by cultivating that lousy energy unity technique." Patriarch Jiang Yin cried out involuntarily, as if a thunderbolt had just struck his head. How is that possible? Ancestral Master? Could it be that the 2 ancestral masters, they were killed by Wuxia? Immortal Green Staff sprung to his feet abruptly and roared, Wuxia? That scum who deceived his master and killed his ancestral master, he. Immortal Greenstaff's eyes turned bloodshot as well. Suddenly, the corners of his eyes cracked, and 2 streams of blood tears rolled down his cheeks. Patriarch Yuanhua smiled faintly and said in a deep voice, "It was me who sent Chi'er and Min'er to kill Wuxia. I even gave them the primordial gold talisman given by a senior to protect themselves. After all, Panga continent is a place where crooks and dragons mix together. It is not an easy place for them to go." Laughing, Patriarch Yuanhua gave Patriarch Jiangyin a heavy slap on the shoulder and said with a sigh, "I never thought that Chi'er and Min'er would die just like that. Emol Wan and the others who came with them, none of them were spared. Their souls were all destroyed, and not even a broken soul was left behind." Immortal Greenstaff's eyes went wide as he snapped, "Was it really Wuxia who did it?" Goddess Green Melon cried out in alarm. "Why did Patriarch ask Master, Uncle Master, and others to kill Wuxia?" The couple exchanged a glance, then turned to look at Patriarch Yuanhua at the same time. Patriarch Yuanhua flipped his hand, revealing a soul jade slip lying in his palm. A startling crack could be seen running across it. Obviously, the owner of the soul jade slip had suffered a very serious injury, which was why such a crack could be seen. Patriarch Yuanhua said coldly, "This soul jade slip belongs to Wuxia." When Chi'er and Min'er's soul jade slip shattered, his soul jade slip also cracked. Clearly, the person who killed Chi'er and Min'er is Wuxia. Taking a deep breath, Patriarch Yuanhua said bluntly, "The reason why I want to kill Wuxia is because of Zhang Lu. I want Zhang Lu to become a member of Yuanhua sect. A person who will never betray Yuanhua sect. As long as Zhang Lu stays on Green Cliff Planet for a few periods, the planet will definitely become a spirit planet filled with immortal veins. At that point of time, it will not be difficult for her to break through the realm of Gold Immortal." Immortal Greenstaff was taken aback, while Goddess Green Melon said straightforwardly, "Ancestral Patriarch, if this is the reason, there is no need to." Patriarch Yuanhua interrupted Fairy Green Melon with a muffled snort, then said coldly, "Regardless of whether it is right or wrong, this is the result. Chi'er and Min'er are dead, Wuxia must die as well, and all those related to him must die as well. Zhang Lu must marry Yuexin and become a true core disciple of Yuanhua sect. A core disciple who will never leave us." Pressing his palm heavily on Patriarch Jiangyan's shoulder, Patriarch Yuanhua cried out sternly, "Tell me, what is the background of Wuxia? Where did you recruit him?" The immense immortal pressure made Patriarch Jiangyan gasp for breath. With a blank expression, he raised his head and told Patriarch Yuanhua about the existence of Myriad Immortals planet. Patriarch Yuanhua's eyes flickered with a bright gleam, while Immortal Greenstaff and Goddess Green Melon had their expressions flickered. Never in their wildest dreams did they expect that Patriarch Jiangyan would have such a fortuitous encounter. In a remote place like the minor heavenly circle realm, he actually managed to find a priceless planet left behind by 2 great apocalypses. "I see." Patriarch Yuanhua bowed his head and laughed coldly. "Well then, Greenstaff, Green Melon, bring some men with you. All the cultivators on Myriad Immortals planet must join Yuanhua sect unconditionally. Take control of their nascent divinities, and kill anyone who dares to resist. Capture all the members of Great Yan's imperial clan alive, and bring them to Green Cliff Mountain." A cruel smile emerged at the corner of Patriarch Yuanhua's mouth. "I'll use the lives of all the members of Great Yan's imperial clan to force Zhang Lu to marry Yuexin. Let's see if this little girl can still escape from my scheme," said Patriarch Yuanhua in an insidious voice. Patriarch Yuanhua stretched out both hands and clenched his fists tightly. Suddenly, he threw his head back and burst into tears. "Min'er, watch me. I'll definitely avenge you." You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.